And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution is not going to get that man today. No, because I'm going to get him.
This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It's a Manic Monday edition. It's May 19th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of unbiased, uncensored news, information, and analysis. Information that you need to know in these perilous times in which we live. You're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. We look well beyond the headlines, the bylines, the fog of disinformation, misdirection, misinformation, to bring you the news behind the news. For new listeners, thanks for checking in with us. God bless each and every one of you. We do broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find us on the internet at our home base, HomelandSecurityUS.com. That's HomelandSecurityUS.com, not affiliated with any government agency, of course. We're also simulcast by the good graces of the Christians United Broadcasting Network. Troy, thank you so much. There you can find us at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. Spell it all out. The Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. 2 N's on Hagmann. Spell out the word and there you have it. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for your belief and your trust in us. And I want to say that we are so grateful to have with us tonight just a great man of valor, he's a CIA officer, and Robert Tosh Plumley. He's a friend of the program, of course. Mr. Plumley has made headlines. He's on our newsmaker line. He's made headlines for holding the administration's feet to the fire, holding accountable, I should say, that those people in power that need to answer some questions. And those questions revolve around Benghazi. Mr. Plumley has a Facebook page, and he's maintaining that. But instead of going forward, by the way, Mr. Plumley's got a stellar military career. He's just an excellent man. Mr. Plumley, glad to have you on with us.
Very much for having me on. Can you read me now? We've been having a little problem with Skype, so I'm on cell phone now. Apologize for the quality if it's down.
No, it's very good. Yeah, it's interesting, folks. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, we have our issues. It's interesting, right before the show, Skype's working, everything's fine. And minutes before the program airs, Mr. Plumley's on 5x5. We could hear him. He can't hear us. We have audio issues, so now we're back to the cell phone. Brand new headset, computer, everything. Go figure, coincidence, I'm sure. But at any rate, glad you're joining us tonight, Mr. Plumley.
Well, glad to be with you.
Well, I got to tell you, since the last time you were on, you had caused a lot. I mean, the last time you were on our show, in fact, you were on with our intelligence asset insider W, and you guys were talking about all sorts of things, but you were talking about Benghazi and about the 11 questions you posed and everything. What's happened since the last time you were on? And that's been about what is it, Joe? About a week? Thereabouts.
Week and a half. Yeah.
Week and a half. Yeah. What's been going on, Mr. Plumley?
Well, not anything really. The questions have been circulated through both parties, House, Republican senators, everything, even to POTUS, and they don't acknowledge the questions. We've had, my last count, over 1,900 people that have sent letters to registered representatives asking very simple questions, asking yes or no. These questions are not hard to answer. I don't know, yes or no. And for some reason, mainstream media refuses to ask the proper elected officials those questions. Proper is the right word to use, but we've asked many people on Facebook have sent letters, snail mail, to their elected representatives, and some of them have only got returns for campaign contributions, asking for campaign contributions and not asking the questions. I've been pushing these questions on my Facebook page ever since last August. Everybody does a lot of talk in Washington, D.C., but just simply take one of the questions, just one of those 11 questions, and ask that question to anybody in Washington, D.C., and the object behind asking those questions is to get those questions on official record so that if they were answered yes or no, at a later date when the proper documentation is revealed, like it was in the emails just recently, then we have something to go on to ask the proper elected officials why they lied on a simple yes or no question.
Right.
And so we have taken that and posted it over and over and over, duplicated, and they just flat refuse to address those questions. Not address them. They flat refuse to acknowledge them. So that only leaves me to keep pushing as an investigative journalist. Why won't you ask the questions? Why won't you answer the questions? Anybody in Washington, D.C., any of our elected officials, why won't they answer those questions? Why won't they go on the record and ask those answer those questions? It's very simple. So the only thing conclusion that I can come to is that there's a massive cover-up, and in my opinion, with my background and what I know, I conclude that it's covering up an international gun-running operation that's been going on for over 40-something years, and the guns are pilfered, sent overseas, out of our direct commercial sales, monitored by the Blue Lantern, which, by the way, is supposed to be handled by the U.S. State Department. So I try not to make allegations, but I'm dumbfounded because they won't acknowledge these questions or answer. And every time someone does try to answer, we get a diversion. Send me some money, anything contributions. Long letters responding, but not addressing the questions. So I'll shut up and let you talk about me for a while now.
It seems. Look, we have sent letters from our ends to our representatives. Got no response. We have. No response. Period. We've sent emails, gotten no response. We've written about this, gotten people who would a lot of support for wanting the information, but then there's a lot of people out there who want to make this into a political issue, and of course it's really not a political issue. It's about the lifeblood of our country. But let me ask you, out of the box, straight out of the gate here, the Select Committee. Do you have any faith in that, in the Select Committee that's being formed?
Well, I would really, really, honestly love to have faith. But they are demonstrating to me a lot of rhetoric about what they're going to do, but I have not seen any action yet. I haven't seen anything. If I was there, I would ask whoever's setting up these select committees, I would ask them those questions. I would ask them, can you, sir, answer one of those questions? Yes or no. Are we shipping arms to the Middle East? Bam, through the direct commercial sales program. That's one. Is the U.S. State Department monitoring the U.S. direct commercial sales program? That's two. Those only require yes or no. If we are sending weapons to the Middle East, are we tracking those weapons once they're there? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, and we find out that they're in safe houses in Jordan, and we don't know about it, then something's wrong. Why isn't the people that are supposed to be monitoring this program monitoring the program? We are short. This is a secondhand source information, but from a reliable source that works the program. we were short over $16 billion in U.S.-made weapons. Where are they? Where did the money go? So my contention is simply this. We were involved in an international gun-running operation. We traced all the way back to Cuba in the 50s, especially in the Iran-Contra era, and other brush wars in Angola that end up with U.S.-made American weapons in radical hands. So the only thing that I can conclude is that we start a conflict, we escalate the conflict, and we furnish both money to both sides of the conflict, or we furnish guns to both sides of the conflict, and then we assimilate that money through cutout companies and private contractors back to campaign contributions, and that is the reason, in my opinion, that they refuse to answer those questions. Answering those questions can open the door to an international gun-running operation that has been on the books, black book, for a number of years.
Okay. Wow. And for those in our listening audience, and our listening audience grows every week, that either didn't hear you last week or when you were on, or for whatever reason, you've got experience going back into the into the early '60s with the CIA and operations such as this. What can you tell us? I mean, the template's the same, isn't it?
I'll sum it up like this. When I was 20 years old, I was flying co-pilot for Regina Airlines out of Miami, Florida, and Riddle Airlines out of Miami, Florida. Riddle was at that time a startup cargo company. Regina was a Cuban air cargo carrier. We would take guns that were pilfered and stolen from National Guard armories, and we were taking those by the El Castro. At the same time, because of the OAS treaty, we were also supplying tanks, planes, and armament and ammunition and guns to Batista. So we had guns going to Batista, and under the table in black operations, CIA sponsored, through the White House, through the Pentagon, we were sending guns to this rebel, Fidel Castro. At that time, people only pronounced his name as Castro. And in fact, Raul Castro, his brother, gave me one of the fatigue hats when we were in there at one time. Now that was the 50s. Bring it on up, fast forward through a lot of things. We had Angola. U.S.-made weapons showed up in Angola. We've had other brush wars. We come up into the Iran-Contra, one of the biggest arms smuggling operations that's ever been known in the United States. Now, here's the thing. I don't expect anybody to believe anything that I say. I'm only asking them what I do say, go out and investigate it. There have now, after all these years, the documents are now creeping forward that substantiates that the CIA was not running guns, the White House was running guns, and the Pentagon, knowledge, was running guns, to weapons, high-impact weapons, to foreign agents. And that's about all that I can say. I mean, it was just an internet. What the cover-up is in Benghazi, what the cover-up was in Iran-Contra, what the cover-up was in the Batista days, and also Haiti and Angola, was international gun running that comes from the United States arsenals. Now, in order to prove what I say, I'm just simply asking this. Why doesn't the Senate and the Congress investigate, inventory through the GAO, where our weapons are, and announce to the American people how much money we're short on those weapons? Again, go back and follow the money. Now, that's going to be very hard to do because a series of cutout companies are always used to distribute that money, and the same thing is used to assimilate those weapons in foreign countries or to take those weapons into foreign countries. In the Benghazi case, before the ambassador was killed, weapons on C-130s were coming from the United States, even with air-to-air refueling, and going into foreign countries. And later it was exposed, but nothing was done in the press about it. A little back coverage, and that's about it, and then that went off the wires. Jordan, Turkey, Qatar, and Pakistan, safe houses run by cutout contractors affiliated with the CIA, control those weapons. Those weapons were taken by U.S. Navy Marines around SEALs, as a matter of fact, escorted those weapons around the Horn, some of them into the annex there near Benghazi. Now, that's what we discussed last year, last week, I believe it was, when we were here.
Right,
so
right.
The question being is, what happened to those weapons when they went to the annex? When the riot started, what happened to those weapons at the annex? Those weapons were removed at the same time that the riot was starting. The riot on the ambassador, in my opinion, was a diversion so that the annex and other areas where these U.S.-made weapons were stored could be pilfered and sent off to other operations. Basically, the reason that we were shipping these weapons to these that particular foreign country is that we were setting up a secret army. This was before the Syrian rebels were formed. Sometime after that, about a year after we had those weapons that we were shipping pilfered and stolen, allegedly stolen, we went into a systematic thing of trying to cover it up. Why do we want to cover it up? I mean, so we're setting up a secret army. So then when it started coming out about the weapons being stored in Jordan, suddenly the president of the United States made an announcement that we're going to help the rebels. We're going to set up the rebels. We'd already been funneling arms to the rebels for over 2 years. Now, all I'm asking, where is the investigative body in the Senate and the Congress that should be investigating what I say? They should be investigating, trying to defuse me. Now, if I'm a rebel rouser, I'm a conspiracy freak, or I'm just starting trouble, I'm not asking them to do anything. Answer the questions and investigate what I say. That's all. Follow the money. Now, my contention is this. They can't follow the money because it would expose the very people in high office that is receiving the money going into campaign contributions. If you notice, we have a tremendous election coming up here, which is going to be very, questionable about the legitimacy of it and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I don't get involved in politics. Do not want to get trapped and pushed into politics. I don't care what the Secretary of State, whether she runs or doesn't run, or whatever she does. And I don't call names. I don't cuss people out. I don't say things like that. The point is, and in my opinion, what needs to be investigated is not what someone did with their pee-pee when they did it, not what someone did over and what they said, what was an ethnic slur. What needs to be investigated is where in the hell those guns go and where the hell their money go. Why is our Treasury short? Why isn't the GAO doing their job? Now, we had the same thing happen in Iran-Contra. We took weapons off the books when our 82nd and 101st went down to hold maneuvers in Honduras. I'm one of the pilots that flew the weapons back to El Toro Marine Naval Air Station, China Lakes, to be retrofitted and then taken back down and given to radical groups and rebel groups in Central America and all the way down into Argentina. So there's an international weapons smuggling operation going on, run right out of the White House, the CIA logistical support, and the Pentagon knows all about it. I can't say it any plainer than that, can I?
No, no, and that's mighty plain. I'll tell you that. Folks, we're talking to Robert Tosh Plumley. He's got a Facebook presence, Robert Tosh Plumley, and I would urge everybody listening to this program, if you do follow Facebook or if you're on Facebook, certainly support Mr. Plumley on Facebook. He's got posted 11 questions, and they're very simple questions. And the first one, as he just stated, is the U.S. secretly arming and supporting various factions of the Syrian rebels with impact weapons from the United States arsenal? Now, very simple question, yes or no answer.
Let me interject something right here. It says, the question originated way back in August. The question was, are we? Now, since that time, it's been exposed that we are. The president announced we're supporting we're sending weapons to the Syrian rebels. At the time that we were stockpiling the weapons, the Syrian rebels were not even formed. The radical groups pilfered sold the weapons that we shipped, the United States arsenals, into that area. Then later, we decided, okay, the president makes an announcement, we're going to help these poor people, and we're going to stop this atrocities that's going on and all these dead people that's killing over there. We're going to step in. We're going to help those people with their guns. We had already been arming a secret army and setting it up. That's my point. Now, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I wanted to clear that because when the question comes out, it's asking, are we? Well, yes, today, we are arming them. Didn't you hear the president? He said we are arming them. I'm asking, were we arming those people in August of 2013? Was we are arming those rebels in August of 2010? Were we arming those quote rebel factions in 2011? Did the ambassador find out what was going on? Oh, wait a minute. The ambassador already knew what was going on, because what he was concerned about was not the weapon shipment. He was concerned about why these radical groups were getting Stinger missiles. So he wasn't complaining about the weapons. He wasn't complaining about people making movies. He was complaining about how are these radicals getting Stinger missiles. He already knew about the gun running operation. That was part of his cover, and that was why he was sent over there to monitor and run that operation. Now,
he was the number.
Just said yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. You finish your sentence. Go ahead.
Well, I sort of forgot what it was.
Okay. Well, then I'll ask this. Wasn't Stevens, before he came into Libya, like the masthead on the Titanic or whatever, wasn't Stevens the number 2 or number 3 man in Syria for a while? Wasn't he? And didn't he have basically a black book, a Rolodex of every good guy, bad guy, every terrorist, wannabe?
Stevens was a CIA. Stevens was monitoring operations for the CIA under the disguise of an ambassador. In other words, he's an intelligence officer. You understand what I just said?
I do. And for the listeners, folks, you heard that. Ambassador Chris Stevens was an intelligence officer, which means that he was playing quite an underhanded role. Yeah, dual role. Wow. Okay. What was
now? Okay.
Go ahead.
So here's what I hope. What I just said, I hope somebody get off their butts in Washington D.C. and challenge me on that statement. That's a fair question, isn't it?
100%
Because if
fair.
they challenge me on that question, it will open up everything. And if they issue me a subpoena, I would be glad to honor that subpoena when that Secretary of State goes hand in hand with me and raises the right hand, and I'll raise my right hand, and I will repeat what I just told you. She will repeat what she knew at the time. One or two things, in my opinion. These are my opinions. Either she knew or she's incompetent. If she's incompetent, well, that just fits with most of the people there in D.C. So there's nothing wrong with that. But did she lie? That's the question. Did she know? Did she lie? Did she know and tell Congress and the Senate that she didn't know? That her staff knew, didn't know, that nobody knew? Then if that's the case, why not release all the documents specific throughout the FOIA? Why not ask specific questions? Ask the 11 questions. Send it to the State Department. Ask them to release the documentation that Ambassador Stevens sent to the State Department about his concerns about Stinger missiles. Now, he already knew about the gun running. He already knew about the safe houses in Jordan, Qatar, and Pakistan and Turkey. He knew about all that. In other words, because we were building a secret army, secretly, covert, to go in and destabilize or form our own army for whatever reason, sell them the guns, let the guns get out of stock into rebels' hands, and then also be stolen from those rebels and then shoot down our helicopters with U.S. Navy SEALs on board. Now, to me, that's an atrocity that I will not let go uninvestigated. If they want to put me in jail for what I just said, then bring me in front of a federal judge, because I'll tell it to the federal judge. This thing needs to be investigated. It stinks to high heaven. And I said I wasn't going to get upset about this. I'm not upset. I just cannot understand the corruption that we're going through in this country. One matter after another, over and over and over. I have never seen in all my 76 years the incompetence that's running wild in Washington, D.C. It's unreal. In other words, in fact, it's so unreal that the American people have been sanitized into the state of apathy and laziness that they don't want to hear what I'm talking about. Because, it's too complicated, they're not going to do anything about it. That's right, they're not going to do anything about it, and they've just demonstrated that to you by not answering your memos, and also to me and over 2,000 other people that have sent memos to every registered representative, and the only thing they have got in return is being asked for campaign contributions. That is ridiculous. Now, I'll shut up and let you talk about me for a while.
Talk about you. We talked earlier today, and folks, I just want to say this. It's easy to get weary, tired, just upset, and battle fatigue has set in. And I've got to tell you, Tosh is fighting the battle. He's got a Facebook account. This weekend, I read on his Facebook account where, it was hacked. It was he was marginalized and character assassinations attempted. Folks, we are fighting a battle of battles, and I've got to tell you, Tosh, Robert Tosh Plumley needs the field support that y'all showed us with Butter Dezillion and the Fuddy thing. We're making headway there. So it's amazing what we can do when we come together as an audience. It's amazing the pressure that we could put on to bear on the people. And I think that this is what we all need to do. Tosh, if everyone listening did one thing, could do one thing to help the cause for truth, what would you say that they do? Would it send another letter, send a snail mail letter, demand answers? If everyone listening, which is a lot, if they did one thing to one person, would it be the Bonnier? Would it be the Trey Gowdy? Would it be, or you tell me what we need to have our audience do?
Get rid of the lobbyists that have total access to our elected representatives that can do the payoffs to them to get them to vote in certain measures that are benefit special groups. That would be a start. In other words, start monitoring and start investigating their own people. I have a saying. It's an old saying that comes way back in whenever. But we have found the enemy, and he is us. And that can never be no more of a true statement in this particular political age. In other words, Washington, D.C. needs to weed out their own corruption. There's good people in every agency. There's good people in the CIA. There's good people in DIA. All the alphabet people have damn good people working for them, even including the IRS. But the gatekeepers that are put there by special interests will not let them do their jobs. Mainstream media is the same way. There are senior editors and gatekeepers that monitor people like me and others, and also the documentation that proves what people like me and others say. But the gatekeepers will kill the story. They will fire the reporter. If the reporter does not go along with what they want, mainstream media, and who controls mainstream media? This administration. In other words, if you don't tickle the ears of this administration, then they will come down on you. Their gatekeepers will come down on their sub-reporters, the people that's trying to do their jobs and do it fairly and honestly and with integrity will get pushed out. The only people that can function in this particular society and our government today is the ones that are as crooked as the ones they work for. So, how did this happen? I just simply say this. It happened because the apathy and the laziness of the American people not paying any attention to what was going on, not paying any attention to what was going on with the bills that were being passed for special interest, not caring, and then taking the attitude that they're all corrupt. They are all corrupt because we let the corruption in. So we get the government we deserve, perhaps. So, but now we're faced with a more problem. Everybody can define the problem we have, but where in the hell are the people that's defining the solutions to this problem? Do we throw them all out and start all over, the good with the bad, because we don't have time to sort them out? I mean, I'm just asking some more questions. What do we do? So,
well,
my contention is this. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, we need to get them all out. But is there, for everyone listening to this broadcast right now, if they, before they went to bed tonight or went to work tomorrow or went to bed, before tomorrow night's show, if there was one thing that they could possibly do proactively, what would you recommend that we can do? Would it all be to collectively write a snail mail letter to someone, or to send an email, or to make a phone call? What do we need?
Do it all. Snail mail, phone calls, emails. Pester the hell out of them. I mean, they pester the hell out of us, wanting us to give campaign contributions. So let's pester the hell out of them and demand those answers to those 11 questions. I mean, this is supposed to be a special investigation.
Who do we ask? Do we make the calls to our own representative?
Every one of our elected officials, the good and the bad.
Gotcha.
That's what I would do. I mean, we're talking about a big march on Washington and how they counter the big march on Washington. They infiltrate their own cronies dressed like radicals to go in and incite the riot that is going to start. If that situation gains momentum, I guarantee you someone's going to get shot. It's going to be labeled to one of the demonstrators.
Yeah, Tosh, the folks.
That subject up. That's another subject.
Well, you know what? Since you brought that up, let's talk about that because I think this is important for people to really understand. Separately, ladies and gentlemen, my source within DHS and Mr. Plumley has got his sources. We're talking off air today, and we were talking about the march in Washington right now, the American Spring. And as we talked about it, we both found out that we had similar information, identical information about what was going on. Mr. Plumley, give us an outline of what your sources had suggested that is taking place at DC.
I was asked to speak at that rally. I couldn't, and also I found out from 4 separate sources, 2 military and 2 work for government in very strategic places, which I cannot do anything that would even point a smoke screen or smoke to those people, telling me not to be extremely careful. This is a planned operation to sucker people in so they can take names and kick ass. All right, so what does that mean? That's my question. What does that mean? Well, we have hired, we being the United States government, have hired radicals to go and turn, and also police officers from various jurisdictions, to dress like the, quote, quote, as they call them, radicals that are marching on Washington, and infiltrate that crowd and provoke that crowd to violence, anger, violence, to provoke that crowd to show their weapons, to march on Washington with weapons, to be in violation of Washington's gun law. Therefore, they can be arrested. When they start to be arrested, there's going to be violence. When they start to take their guns away, there's going to be violence. I got reports of bikers are going to arm themselves and they're going to ride on Washington. And the truckers are going to follow. They expect that, and they're going to be waiting. There will be snipers in strategic places, and when someone comes up and rebel rouses, gets an ear, or gets out of the designated talking areas that they've provided for these people to demonstrate, then they broke the law and they become felons, or they busted the law, they're going to jail. after they get the hell beat out of them. You know, after one of them just brushes up against one of those goons that the syndicate has put in place under law enforcement, when they brush up against them, they attack them. So they're justified in bringing those people down. So this is a setup, and those people are walking right into it. So my contention is reorganize. In other words, get everybody together at once and march on Washington. The Colonel Riley, I guess, or Riley or whatever his name is, I guess he tried to do that. But it's falling apart. But it isn't falling apart. Mainstream media tells us it's falling apart. But it can't be organized. They put a perimeter up around the Capitol. They put designated talk areas up, demonstration areas, where they only allow 50 to 60 to 100 people in that particular area. So therefore they divide and conquer, and they're doing a damn good job of it. Anyway, I don't want to do all the talking on your program here.
Well, no, that's why we asked you to come on. No, Tosh, that's why we asked you to come on, because we want you to talk. We want to know what you know.
Okay, so these people that are out there in the Washington streets tonight, and these truckers that are marching on Washington, I beg them, don't carry weapons. Well, they said, well, we've got to protect ourselves against the ones that shoot. We're going to have another Kent State. Those children didn't have weapons. They got fired on and 4 of them got killed. Do you know what I'm talking about? Another situation that happened many years ago was with People's Park. There was another situation where Americans got killed for demonstrating and demanding their rights. It was called the hippie movement back in those days, and they were radicals and they were crazy, you know. But now those hippies have grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And this country's screwed up. The very things that they were really rallying against when they were young has also been tarnished and overridden by the corruption that's in Washington, D.C. for my elected officials today. So I'll back off here a little bit. I don't want to get political. I'm trying to state a fact. My information came from very reliable sources out of Homeland Security, the Pentagon, and also people that's in an elected position. So that's 3 separate sources. I have a thing. Twoism is a truism. When you get the same information from 2 separate sources, you better investigate that information, because there's smoke there someplace. And where there's smoke, there's damn fire. And in the weapons deal, there's smoke out there. You better start finding out where these weapons are going. That's my opinion, of course.
What about... Go ahead, Joe.
I thought you lost our contact.
No. No, you're
I'm
going
a
to
little
hear...
paranoid. Yeah, I guess I am. You know.
You got right to be. You got right to be, Tosh. You're going to hear a couple of second delay. Don't worry about that, because we're on a little bit of a delay here. Go ahead, Joe.
Speaking on the Operation American Spring, you said that you had information that this is more or less a operation to cause violence and chaos, not from the point of the protesters, but from the government. You said
they're
that
going to pick up a radical guy, some radical, or 4 or 5 groups of radicals that are out here hollering, dirty and cussing and whatever, and really expressing their freedom of speech. And they're going to move on them, and they're going to provoke them. And when they start hitting and swinging, that's when the tear gas starts flying. That's when the snipers start shooting. Now, can I say it any plainer than that?
No, that was very, very plain. And we have gotten other information that through subversion and the tactics normally used, that some of these groups have been co-opted, and some of the people down there are not who they say they are. And
well, that's a truism of a truism, and it comes from many separate sources. But you don't get any investigators that will say that. You don't get any mainstream media that will say that. This broadcast that we're doing right now will definitely not be picked up by mainstream media. This administration will see that mainstream media. When you control the communications, you control the people. When you control the people's voice, you've won the battle.
Yeah, not only their voice, but through the controlling of the media. They control the conscience of the people, the way that they think and how to think. And the more the people rely on those outside voices, the more that they'll be taken away from their natural instincts.
That's it. So we go into a paranoid defensive state, and we explain and we try to justify by rhetoric what we're doing and why we're doing it. So, and then a diversion is thrown up at us. What someone did with their PP, or they use the N word, or they, what, or IRS did a nasty. I mean, there's 1,000 diversions out there. Why the media, mainstream media? Okay, let me do a parallel here if I can. 60,000 Mexican citizens were killed in 3 years, tells, with U.S.-made weapons. How come the American people don't know that? But yet they can tell you when 5 people were killed in Turkey with a roadside bombing. They can tell you when 10 people were killed in Somalia. And they can tell you about the warlords that are running around all in that country and how come they need help. We know about all those things, but our next-door neighbor, who has been fighting a drug war in and out for a number of years, we don't know a damn thing about what's going on down there. Does that make sense to you?
No. You give us that number again.
Over 60,000. Check it out. Don't believe Tosh Plumlee. Check it out. How many Mexicans have been killed in the cartel drug wars in the plazas? In Juarez. In Juarez alone, in 1 year, there were 6,000 people killed right across our border from Fort Bliss. We even sent troops in to Mexico to train the Navy Marinos to go in and weed out the corruption in the Mexican army. They took the guns that we give them through legal channels of the direct commercial sales program, the guns that we shipped to the Mexican army through treaties and agreements that we had. And then the Mexican army deserts, takes half those guns with them to the cartel and set up the Sinaloa, or the Zeta, not the Sinaloa, that was another cartel. And the Zeta and the Sinaloa start fighting. They control plazas in there where they kill. I posted on my Facebook page a shootout right in front of them, with American weapons. Brian Terry was killed with a U.S.-made weapon, and it didn't come from a small mom-and-pop shop. Anybody can go on Google and order and just Google anti-aircraft weapons Mexico Juarez. How do you get an anti-aircraft weapon to Mexico in the back of a pickup truck? How do you buy an anti-aircraft weapon from a mom-and-pop shop? How does a straw person pick up a weapon of that caliber, including 50 caliber sniper rifles and American-made goggles, night vision goggles? How do they get them across the border? So there's 1,000 questions that our elected officials should be asking about Mexico. You don't realize that Mexico almost cut diplomatic relations with us over this issue. Check it out.
What was
Plumlee's lying or what?
Well, Tosh, now that we're on this subject, because a lot, and by the way, Tosh, we've got a lot of people emailing and wanting to talk to you. Our phone banks are filling up here from people who are just wanting to ask you questions. But what was Fast and Furious? I mean, what do you know about that, and what was that about? If you want to comment on that, this is a non-scripted interview.
Okay, I'll comment on it. I don't have a teleprompter, and I don't have speech writers writing crap for me either. What I'm telling you comes from what I know. I lived it. I worked it. I was employed by it. I flew it. I was on my hands-on practical experience, and I don't work off theories. So, Fast and Furious, ATF set up an operation. They thought they could go find out where all this stuff was coming from, and they could track these things. I'll tell you experience. Bill Conroy, Narco News. Check him out. Check Plumlee. Put Narco News, Plumlee, Mexico, on Narco News. Find out when the boots on the ground went into Mexico. Find out what we found when we had raided stash houses in there and took pictures. American weapons. stored in places. A quarter of a mile across the border fence, a new million-a-mile border fence that is 3 foot high with cross-tank barriers with a little strip of metal running down the center. You can hop over it, step over it. That's after you get outside the little border towns. You know what I mean? Then the fence goes from 15 foot down to 3 foot, and it runs that way for hundreds and hundreds of miles. Anyway, a ranch. This is another thing. Check Plumlee out. Check Rated Mexican Ranch Plumlee. Rated Mexican Ranch Plumlee.
Okay, Rated Mexican
Check it out.
Ranch Plumlee. Okay, Rated Mexican
Right, and then go in
Ranch.
there. Right. Yeah. Escondido is the name of the ranch. Border Patrol. I took the pictures of the Border Patrol shaking hands with the Mexican Marinos after they raided the ranch. Salem News and Narco News published it. I get $1 a year to work for Salem News as a photojournalist and an investigative reporter. The reason that I'm even doing this is onefold, is to protect myself. Sunshine is the only thing that will keep me alive at this point. Hopefully, that might even not work. I don't. That's not the issue. But the issue is, check it out. Now, we're talking about Mexico. The question was, how come we don't know about what I'm just telling you? How come good investigative reporters have laid their life on the line inside Mexico, bringing this stuff to the American people and to our elected officials, only to have it shoved up their butts and also lose their jobs, and in some cases, commit suicide? Now, when and where is this stuff I'm talking about going to be investigated? The team that I work with, Task Force 7, inside Mexico, training out the calling in the Marinos from Mexico City to train them in intelligence gathering techniques and also how to fly drones, because they went to drone school up in Nevada, and went in there to do what? To gather the intelligence and find out what was going on as far as the drug lords. Now, since we're talking about Mexico, and I know in essence of time I'm trying to speed out here, but Carl Quintero was sentenced to 50 years and he did 28. He got out. He disappeared. Do you want to know how he got out?
Please, yes. Yes.
Okay. He made a deal after a while when the new president was coming into Mexico that he would spill the beans on the $21,000 a month that he was receiving from the CIA so that aircraft from the United States could land and be refueled on their way to Santa Elena, Costa Rica, for the secret airbase known as Point West and Oliver North's notebooks. Now, also, Chapo Guzman finally got captured. We haven't heard another word, and we have supposed to have extradition request to Mexico to bring those two to the United States to try them. Prior to their capture, they had $5 million rewards on their heads. And one of them gets out of jail because he says, I'm getting ready to talk. He couldn't talk when he was in the party because he was responsible for killing a DEA agent or knew about it, and the CIA was present when that DEA agent was tortured to death. His name was Kiki Camarena. Now, DEA knows this. The DEA can't get past their gatekeepers to investigate that. And my God, it's been so long ago. What difference does it make? You see what I just said?
Well, Hillary.
What difference does it make?
Yeah,
what difference
Hillary.
does it make that Kiki Camarena was tortured to death when a CIA op man was standing there watching it? I used to say that the CIA op man couldn't do a damn thing because they'd have killed him too. They have a way of cutting your face off and putting it on a basketball. You know what I'm talking about? That's
pretty harsh reality.
It's reality. In other words, to be dismembered piece by piece while you're still alive is a pretty horrible way to go, isn't it? How come we don't know those things in the United States? But yet we know everything about roadside violence. We know everything about what they're supposed to be over there because we're escalating a conflict in a foreign country and we're supplying the weapons to those conflicts on both sides for money, for profit. Talk about the ugly American, that's about as ugly as we can get. And that's why I want my country back. I am an American citizen, and I'm appalled at what the hell we've been doing. And I've had over damn near 50 years in one form or another, in and out, on the farm, only to be called when I needed money and when they needed me. And my CIA friends that are listening to this know exactly what the hell I'm talking about when I say the farm. You understand what I just did? I sent a message to Langley.
Yeah.
I know they're listening. I know what they're doing. I know what
they're listening.
So bring me in front of a federal judge, a couple of them. Because here's what's going to happen. I'm one guy right now that was involved in that. I run cocaine in this country, and it was written about in 1990, April. I'm a guy that admitted I run 40 tons of cocaine into this country on C-130s. I took loads and loads of weapons out of this country as far south as Argentina, and all the way into Nicaragua, and all the way into Costa Rica, and all the way into John Hall's Ranch, and all the way into Puerto Escondido, and all the way into Oaxaca, and all the way into Point West, Santa Elena, Costa Rica. Now, how come American people don't know that those guns were and weapons and cocaine was going back and forth? A Marine colonel by the name, and write this down, and have our friends look it up. Don't believe what Tosh Plumley says. Go check it out. Log in the name. Colonel James Sabot, U.S. Marine. Colonel James Sabot committed suicide with a shotgun stuck up his mouth when his wife went to church. And what had happened later on the investigation, he was done with suicide. Shortly after that, Gary Webb shot himself twice in the head, suicide. What was those two men investigating? He was a wing commander at El Toro. He found out about the cocaine that I was bringing in on the C-130. It was supposed to be in an interdiction program that was being stored and under lock and key at El Toro. And the evidence bin was, quote, quote, being broke into. And that stuff was getting on the streets of L.A. And Gary Webb started investigating, and he and Colonel Sabot started talking about it, and within 2-3 years, both of them are dead by suicide. I'll tell you another one that just died recently here was Rupert, even though he wasn't completely what he said that he was, but yet he was investigating exactly what I was talking about. I'm talking about now. And he just committed suicide. So I just want to let everybody know out there, Tosh Plumley's just opened his mouth pretty strong. I have absolutely no intention of committing suicide. I have absolutely no intention of killing myself. I don't think I'm going to have a heart attack, but the hell, you never know. I'm 76 years old, and I'm tired of what I've seen for 50 years going on with our elected officials. So I know I'm talking a lot, and I'm not giving you a chance to talk, but this has to be investigated. Now, if they want to bring me to jail because I'm talking out of school, I am not a government employee. I have been gagged before. My testimony is classified top secret committee sensitive through John Kerry's committee back in the 90s, in the 80s rather. And why is my testimony back then top secret? Because it talks about Praetorian Guards. It talks about special operations set up to protect certain programs of the presidency. That's what a Praetorian Guard is. John Stockwell was a case officer in Angola. He coined the phrase Praetorian Guard. He had a book called Praetorian Guard. He got in a lot of trouble because at the time he wrote it, he still was under the secrecy clause. At the time I started talking, I was under the secrecy clause. They told me I was going to jail if I divulged this information. I said, bring it on. Let's go talk to a judge. Never heard another word except my house got burned down in Grant, Colorado. Now, okay, that was an accident, right? No, it was a firebomb. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation has a complete report on that. Let the researchers go check it out.
What year was that, Tosh?
Firebomb? That was
what
1980,
year?
August 2nd, 1980. Grant, Colorado. Fire. firebomb. Now, let me tell you something about that little fire. At that time, I was going to write a book. I won't go into title because I don't promote books. I don't get any money. Everything I do is on my own. There was documents later that was reported that came out of that fire and was received by Freedom of Information. And they had burnt stuff around the edges. And there were congressional documents from the Congressional Committee. And my question is, how did those FOIA burned documents be released through the Freedom of Information Act some years later, 2003, that showed burn marks when a house was burned down in 1980? What was in those documents? One of them, with burn edges around, was talking about a counterfeiting operation going on in Cuba, run by the United States to destabilize the country. Wow. What does that mean? So, this has been an ongoing thing, and I feel I should wrap it up, not the program, but wrap it up about what my career has been and why I'm talking the way I'm talking. If I do not talk, I'm dead. If I do talk, I might be dead. But I got a better chance of staying alive at talking. I'm not ratting anybody out. I'm not talking about anybody. I'm saying everything that I just told your radio program and your people out there, our people, the American citizens, don't believe me, go check it out. That's the reason I opened up the Facebook account, so that I could take all this disjointed information in links, pull it all together, and put it out there. I never thought that I would get this kind of support that I've got. I am totally, totally overwhelmed. Over 125,000 people are now talking about that Facebook page. Why? American people are looking for leadership. And boy, they really went to the bottom of the barrel if they're coming more with it. That shows you how far, how bad it hurt. So, that's true story. We're the bottom of the barrel when it comes to the talk show.
We're not professional talk show hosts. We just play them on the radio. But
we're playing radio guy, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So, but somebody's got to get the truth out there, and the amount of information, folks. I just hope. If for whatever reason, if you didn't hear clearly, if you didn't hear everything Tosh said, I hope you go back and listen to this and take this information, research it yourself. Here's a guy that lost his house to an intentional firebombing in 1980. Tosh, let me ask you something. When you were flying cocaine back into the United States, you said 40 tons. Did you believe that you were doing this to get it off the streets?
I tell you what, all of us pilots in those days, the first days before San Elena was formed, the southern front of the Iran country, before the southern front of the Iran country through the Reagan administration, before that was done, we felt there were 16 of us. By the way, 9 of them went to jail and 4 of them are dead. So we honestly thought that we were involved with a DEA interdiction program. We thought by tracing out Carl Quintero's ranch, and when the magazine from the San Diego Reader on April 2nd, 1990, by Neil Matthews, I released all the battle maps to him. He did a tremendous article on I Run Drugs for Uncle Sam by Neil Matthews, San Diego Reader, April 2nd, 1990. It's been posted on the Internet. But in that article, forget about the article and what all is said, but in that article is a detailed map with all the flyways, the aircraft ID numbers, the names of the pilots, including the ones that went to jail, including the ones that are now dead, was all laid out on that map. That same map was taken to Senator Gary Hart through his security advisor, Bill Holden, and Senator Hart wrote a letter to the Senate Armed Service Committee, to the Senate Intelligence Committee, not complaining, but stating, alleged, all this information about the 40 tons of cocaine coming in this country and about the weapons going out. That was turned over to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, and according to his letter, which is also posted on the internet, Senator Gary Hart letter, 1991, a few months after Colonel Sabot was murdered, posted, and they refused to investigate. Later we found out the reason that they refused to investigate, because it would, again, like Benghazi, it would expose the international gun-running operation that was being conducted out of the White House. And at that time, it was the Reagan era. Later, it was the Bush era. Later, it was the Clinton era. We know about MENA. We know about all these places from actual testimony that was covered up and absolutely went no place. The only people that went to jail was third-tier, fourth-tier players, the pilots, the loaders. And after their character assassinated, gone to the wolves, charges were filed on them, and they were ruined. The ones that didn't play ball were murdered, like Colonel Sabot. So, I don't know if I'm following a timeline here. But again,
you are.
All right.
You are.
Again, let these people go out and investigate exactly what I've said. Go back to Cuba. Look, okay, Grenada was a little brush war. Panama, Noriega, hey, man, was he on CIA payroll? Where did the weapons go from Iran-Contra? They were stored over in Panama. When Noriega turned against, he had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of U.S.-made weapons. And I was one of the guys that started flying them back before the war, 89, 90, 91. Go into that time period and take a look and see how many American citizens were murdered, committed suicide, U.S. Marines killed, slaughtered. Nobody wants to cover that. Mainstream media won't touch it. The gatekeepers have been put in place to make damn sure that this story does not see the light of day. Now, Plumlee did a bad thing, but by me releasing systematically all these years, or not all these years, but every time something pops to the surface, in other words, I'm going to talk about it to protect my life. This is before the fact information. If anybody will check the timeline before when the information first became available and when it all actually became investigated, we have a lead time of almost 2.5 years. Why? How many weapons were moved in 2.5 years before they finally investigated and made it public? That's just another question that your investigative researchers can check. What's the time? Follow the timeline. When did operatives start talking? Operatives started talking when the administration, special interest, and the lobbyists started complaining that they were afraid they were going to talk. They were going to kill the cash cow. So those guys had to be first character assassinated, and if that didn't work, they had to have an accident, or they had to blow themselves away with a shotgun in their mouth, or they had to shoot themselves twice in the head. Now, this is an ongoing operation. What we do in ops, we have a successful operation. We run that operation. Then we put it on the shelf. And then a later date, maybe a few years later, that was such a successful operation, and no one investigated it, and no one found out, and the trail has been covered in coals. We'll take that operation off. We'll dust it off a little bit, and then we'll put it in another part of the country. Let's say around the Horn of Africa. We'll just put it out there for a little bit. Well, wait a minute. Here we go. There goes the weapons. Well, we put it out, we dust it off, shake it off, tweak it a little bit, and put it back out in modern day, flown by modern aircraft with modern pilots. Now, some of the guys that are flying these ops today are the grandchildren of the pilots I flew with. Doesn't that sound strange?
It does indeed. Folks, we're foregoing the break to give Mr. Plumlee time here to give us this information. We're going to delay the break. It's amazing to me. I've got so many questions, and other people have so many questions, Mr. Plumlee. One of the questions I have, if I may, you had mentioned Mena, Arkansas. You had mentioned the Clintons, Arkansas, the savings and loan down in Arkansas. I don't have my notes with me here, but I did come across this when I was doing some research for an article I wrote for Canada Free Press and for our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com, about the video ostensibly that caused this Benghazi attack, which of course it didn't, but nonetheless I figured, okay, you want to talk about the video, or you want to question the video, or you want, people want to say the video caused it. Let's talk about the video. Let's expose the video. So, folks,
okay, we'll go back to Benghazi, because I was with that back in the past. But what I was attempting to show here, Doug, is the fact that this is the same MO over many, many years now. I'm breaking that finish. I'm sorry.
No. This is good, because what I came across, Tosh, was, and I don't have my notes right here in front of me from the research I was doing for the video, but the Arkansas Federal, what is it, AFDA or ADFA, Arkansas, the bank down in Arkansas, the federal bank.
Okay, the Keating guys and the robbing of the savings and loans. I can't remember the name of the bank that you're talking about. It's a savings loan, But people don't know that. In other words, this generation does not know that the savings and loans were looted. And,
right.
I won't use the name. I'll let you use that name. Okay.
Well, I guess what I was concerned with
was Keating involved in that?
At the periphery, Keating. Well,
does Vince Foster know about that? That's another guy. I mean, how far do we really want to go into this can of worms?
Well, it's funny you should bring up the strange death of Vince Foster, which his death.
Has anybody ever read the Rudy report? How many times that body was moved before it was classified as a suicide? I mean, I'm just throwing out stuff here. I mean, since you brought it up.
Well, you wouldn't happen to know anything about Mr. Foster, would you? Would you there, Tosh?
No, I don't know nothing about that. I mean, I just know it was another strange death. I just know there was a warning sent out to people like me, pilots and other people that carried out cargo kickers and refuelers, anybody that could point the way to where these aircraft were going in and out. I can talk a little bit about MENA. I've had a lot of reports that are not true, exaggerated. I know all about the kids on the railroad track. I know about the Jeremiah film situation. I was interviewed for that. I know where it went, and I know what people wanted me to say during an election year, and I would not say it. So, yeah, I'm asked a lot. Barry Seal was a good friend of mine, as a matter of fact. In fact, I even went to one of his children's birthday party out of Lake Pontchartrain, around Lake Pontchartrain, in that area many years ago. Before Double Cross, the movie Double Cross about Barry Seal's activity was even made, DEA. So, yeah, I've got a long lineage of knowing some of these things, and so it's very important that I be basically character assassinated at this point, credibility question, blah, 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 and all that. So I'm not going to defend myself. I'm just pointing people where to go to prove what I said. Look at Ben Foster's death. Get the Rudy report. I mean,
exactly. Christopher Ruddy. Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. Christopher Ruddy wrote the book called "The Strange Death of Vince Foster." I would urge everyone to read that. Tosh, I firmly believe Mr. Foster was murdered. I believe that he was. I know that his body was moved based on the blood spatter analysis, based on the forensic evidence alone. But nonetheless, I had heard something about this is just something I heard. I can't verify it, of course. That during the autopsy, a particular something was done to send a message to certain people. Did you hear anything about that?
Well, there was a saying going around politics at that particular time is. I can't go there. That would point out. That would point out. Somebody.
Okay, not a problem.
One of the sayings similar to this: "Don't mess with the Clinton clan." That was a message sent to us pilots. Why was that message sent to us pilots? Why was that message sent to Barry Seal? Barry Seal's murder, he was put up in a safe house by a federal judge, and the cartel was notified where he was going to be. The CIA, in my opinion, was ordered by the White House to go in and get those assassins of Colombia safely into this country so they could gun him down sitting in this Cadillac when he was in front of a safe house that the judge had put him in. So they fingered Seal by putting him in, had to report to a safe house every day at a certain time, spend the night there, because that was part of his federal sentence for his quote, drug running. He was also logging interdiction routes like other pilots, myself included. So the message come out, you don't mess with the Clinton clan. Now, the only time that I've been accused of flying all kinds of drugs into Mena, Arkansas, or knowing what all went on there. My only trip into Mena, or three trips actually, but was number one, to have a cargo seal door fixed by Richmond Aviation, I believe it was. There was a CBS report of a C-130 taxiing into Richmond in Mena, Arkansas, flying a pirate's flag out the left window. I'm the guy who was holding that flag. So CBS photographed that C-130 taxiing in. CBS said it was loaded with drugs. It was not. It was going over there to have a door seal fixed because we couldn't hold pressurization. Now, that's from the pilot. But years later, I heard Plumlee flew into Mena, Arkansas with a C-130 load of guns, and 2 kids were killed on the railroad tracks because they watched the plane land. Now, that's mainstream media report. Do you see why I get a little upset with that?
I can see why you'd get a lot upset. Yeah. But by the way, that was the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, ADFA. I was referring.
There you go.
Yeah, I had a little senior moment there.
Was it Bert Keating that was also involved in ripping off the savings and loans with another guy? What was his name? Neil? Was it Neil? Somebody? Can't quite remember that guy's name. What? Neil? Who was involved in that savings loan? It was Keating. Some guy named Neil somebody.
You're making me dig for my notes here now. I'm trying to find out where I put them here.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Your listening audience. Whatever happened to Neil Bush? How come we don't hear anything about Neil Bush? How come this generation today does not hear anything about the rip-off of the savings and loans? How come they do hear about the rip-off of the banks recently in 2008?
Yeah.
They hear about that because it's their generation. How come they don't know history about the savings and loan scandal? We know about every other scandal. We know about IRS. We know about what someone does with their pee-pee every time they turn around. It's thrown in our face for months by mainstream media, but we don't know what happened around the 80s when billions of dollars suddenly disappeared from savings and loans. And I think it was a guy by the name of Keating, some guy named Bush, or Neil. Was it Neil? Or was it Jeb? Or was it all of them? I don't really know, but I just attacked them just then. So it depends.
My goodness.
So Tosh Plumlee sure as hell not going to defend himself.
and Tosh, I don't see a lot of the Bush clan or the people in government coming to your defense at all in anything. And isn't that sad?
I made an allegation just now. Let them stand up to it. I just repeated history. This is not theory. You know that. It's history. What happened to the savings and loans? Where did the money go? Also, check the commercial sales program, direct commercial sales program during that time span, and ask yourself, where did all those weapons go? Where did all that money go? Where did all these new politicians that run for office that suddenly have a war chest at 10 times? How can a man run for office with not a pot to piss in, and 10 years later he's a multimillionaire? because he's elected official? How come a guy can sit 27 years in office and become a multi-billionaire on government pay? Why aren't the clowns back there investigating themselves? All these do-gooders that come in there and run and say they're going to make those many changes, if they are going to, and they stay in politics in D.C. for any length of time, they're going to be converted to the way the ball is played there in D.C. And if they're not converted, they're thrown out on their ear by some way that he made a racial slur, couldn't keep it in his pants. So the good people are character assassinated and thrown out of government. So if you get in government nowadays, you've got to play by the rules that these 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old people sit there that's been paid by lobbyists. Now, I'm turning political, and I'm sorry about that, because I said I wasn't going to do that. But what I just said, let the people check it. It's factual. Let's say one other thing real fast. I'm a little pissed off about something that went on there in the halls of D.C. I won't mention names, but I do not appreciate a sitting senator calling me a domestic terrorist because I post on Facebook. Okay? Why is my Facebook account being hacked so many times? What's going on out there? What's behind the scenes we don't know about that's being played upon American citizens on the Facebook? Hopefully that I can point the way to get someone to investigate what I'm saying. And I posted it before the fact. So I don't know what else to do. So here's where I'm at now. I'm beginning to think the American people are so apathetic, sensitized, lazy, that we're almost getting the government we deserve. We opened the door because of our apathy, and we let these crooks and syndicate people from Chicago, Miami, wherever, in to that ranks. So we let them in. People don't want to hear this kind of talk. Oh, my God, you're going to get in trouble. My family does not really talk to me that much because they do not want to get rid of the flack. I'm going to be taken down. They don't want to email. They don't want this. They don't want to be involved because they're not going to do anything about it. So why try? Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, and everyone does out there listening. We understand. We're beyond frustrated, Tosh. I mean, we watched. You know something, and ladies and gentlemen, if you were plugged into Tosh's Facebook here recently, we watched live and in color a character assassination, a hacking, a horrific thing against Mr. Plumlee that he had nothing to do with. And it was.
How come I'm not on Skype right now?
That's a good question.
So we were talking about communication.
You know that silence, Tosh, and I've got to tell you, folks, imagine this, and we're not making any allegations here, but imagine this. You know, you've got a perfect Skype connection. 5 minutes before the show, and then 2 minutes before the show, and no, you don't have a Skype connection.
I talked to a good friend after I talked to you this afternoon, and we went through the whole program to make sure everything was working right because we knew we had an 8 o'clock deal. At 10 minutes to 8, you start trying to call me, and I can't hear you. Now, what's that all about? Could we telegraph what time it was going to be? We told everybody it was going to be on Skype. I told them I had to go pick up a new set of headphones because I want to make sure I didn't have any problems. Then we double-checked all that. Now, we're getting off topic here, but I'm just trying to prove that there's an undercurrent out there that you don't know that this is happening. But now we do because of the work that Snowden did and also Manley. Some of them, but look what's happened to them. I'll tell you one other thing real fast, and I'm shotgunning here, I know. But have your people go look up U.S. Army Private Eugene B. Dinkin, Dinkin, not Dinkins, but Dinkin. I'm not going to say any more about it. Go look it up, pull the documents. You can get some of them off the Mary Farrell site. or whatever, but just run it through. Read what that man went through and read what they did to him. And then compare that. Every whistleblower, all the way up to Manning and Snowden, it's the same MO, same operation, a form of character assassination. And they sort of do it, but people are crazy. Or they put them in a psycho ward. Or they malign them by saying, oh, yeah, we know all about him. He's nuts. You know, oh, yeah, he's a hot check writer. And they cherry-pick documents they can find. You know what I mean? They
Sure.
take the documents, cherry-pick documents, and then use that as a confirmation. And here's another thing about our media. Somebody can go out here and make an allegation. He gets a publisher. They publish it in a book. Researchers 10 years later come by and say, oh, wow, look what happened back then. And the whole damn thing was based on a lie. So therefore it becomes fact because it was in a book. Does that make sense to you, Doug?
Well, no, it doesn't make sense to me, but in this day and age, it does make sense. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's a convoluted situation. It would be like, it would be like me, and who hasn't written, accidentally overdrafted their checking account? I'm just throwing out an example. When you were 25, 30 years old, maybe you wrote a check for your electric bill or something, and it bounced. And go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to essence of time here, because I know you're on short leash here.
Well, go ahead.
But let me tell you
Tosh.
that story, and I don't normally tell this story, but back in the 60s, I was accused of writing hot checks all over the country. FBI 105 files, they're all over the internet. I don't have anything to hide. And they said I wrote checks here, I wrote checks there, I wrote checks over here, I wrote checks at Morehouse Fashion. I was arrested for breaking into a National Guard army, blah, blah, blah. I was arrested with a plane load of guns bound for Cuba, but yet I wrote a check to Morehouse Fashions and blah, blah, blah. So then all those documents are used to character assassinate me in those years. Well, in those years, if you drop the flag on the floor, somebody's going to kick your ass. If you said anything about the president, you're going to get it kicked again. Well, that's not the way it is now. But in those particular days, when they even released a document that said I bought a weapon and was considered to be armed and dangerous, and then turned me over to a police officer who asked for my driver's license, and when I reached, because he had run a scan on me and an FBI document come up and said I'd bought a weapon, which I hadn't, and then he almost shot me. Now, that was to take me out, but it didn't happen that way. But okay, let me go one step further. Every one of those checks that have been posted up in the internet page now with 105 files and all that, then they say, wow, man, you can't believe a damn thing Plumlee says because he wrote checks all over the country. But the document, after they threw cherry picking, they did not pick the document that said all the checks that was alleged written by Mr. Plumlee, it was turned over to the FBI crime laboratory, and there was no handwriting similarities. So what does that mean? There was no checks. None. Another document says when Mr. Plumlee was arrested in the aircraft, he was arrested for shipping or flying guns to Cuba. That's the document. The Border Patrol, the custom document says this. When Mr. Plumlee was arrested in Columbus, Ohio, he was attempting to ship guns to Florida. It also said when Mr. Plumlee was arrested in Columbus, Ohio, he was attempting to write a check at Morehouse Fashions. Now, what does that mean? And then here's the thing. Mr. Plumlee was interviewed in jail at Columbus, Ohio. If anybody wants to check the record, there is no arrest record or no jail time served in Columbus, Ohio. Then I'm down in Florida flying guns. I get arrested for a $50, quote, quote, insufficient fund check for King Soopers in Denver, Colorado. I spent 6 months in county jail waiting for a trial, all through the Warren Commission report. I went and stood in front of a judge by the name of Judge Feinsilver, and he sentenced me to the Colorado State Reformatory for an indefinite term. Now, I'm just saying something out there. You got a lot of listeners. Go check it out. indefinite term on a no-account check with no signature that could be matched up as being mine. What was the reason for that? I was released after 9 months and spending 7 months waiting to get in front of Judge Fine-Silver. And then I spent 9 months in the Colorado State Reformatory on that check charge. And I was released 2 weeks after the Warren Commission completed their hearings. What does that mean? And then I had to carry that shadow with me for a number of years, rebuild my credit rating, could not get a flying job, and was forced to go back into ops to make a living. Because I was married and I had babies and all that good stuff. I just told you something about me that I don't talk about too much, but you're listening audience can check it out. Check it out.
You're forced to go back into ops. Black ops, right?
Yeah, that's what happened. So every time I had a thriving business in Colorado, IRS come in and shut me down, confiscated 6 backhoes, 2 corings, all my trucks, and I had 19 employees, and my bank account was tarnished. I spent 10 years fighting the IRS. You know what they did? They said I hadn't filed returns. They said that they had found money that I didn't declare. I worked under 21 different names for CIA. That's why you can't really find a trail on me. You can, but only if I point you to it. So, anyway, I'm getting off on other things. I just told you enough about me. And those are facts.
Wow.
And they're both facts. So, don't know much about that. So anyway, I rebuilt my life. I waited IRS out for 10 years, the statute. They took the first 3 years of my lowest pay, and they estimated the 6 years that I'd worked ops. And they laid a tax lien on me accordingly. And then they started charging me interest, penalties, and late charges. I got up to over $55,000 in the 70s. And I carried that with me all the way up into the years 2000. And then finally made a settlement with them because of the statute had expired. Now, that's my IRS story. And that's all my hot check writing story. It was all covered to cover that pilot that flew those guns and flew in those ops in Angola, in Cuba, and all the way into Central America during those years. And so when you're broke, I went through sheer hell. I went out and lived in the mountains. I'll tell you another story. I went out prospecting. Went out into the Bradshaw Mountains in 1978. Went up and had me a tent. Had me a gold pan and a little old metal detector. And I was sitting there and taking tweezers and putting little gold in little bitty vials and selling them up to Jerry's Hub up there at Carter's Junction. And we were getting $3 a bottle for the gold, little bitty flakes of gold that we found, and we put in a magnifying glass and put in the little thing and sold them to the tourists. IRS came up and stuck their card on my door, on my tree next to my tent, demanding that I call them. And I told them to go piss on it or whatever. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get that way carried away. I'm still a little sensitive about that. So anyway,
wow.
I did. I went down to Scottsdale, Arizona. I sit down there, tried to do my duty as a citizen, tried to work it out. And I had this guy tell me this: Mr. Plumlee, you will pay this, or I will see personally that you go to jail for the rest of your life. I got so mad, I raised up, my knees hit his table, and I dumped the whole thing in his lap. He hit the panic button. Scottsdale police come out. I was standing on the sidewalk, and a good officer, a good law enforcement officer, he says, Mr. Plumlee, please step off federal property. I said, you arrest me. He says, no. He says, I don't like these people any more than you do. He says, please step off the property, and we will see that you get home safely. Now, that's what happened in Scottsdale, Arizona in 1978. I don't know why.
That's incredible.
But what I'm trying to point out is that when you do the kind of work that I do, they can force you back in and also force you to keep your mouth shut because you're under the secrecy clause, the 7-year secrecy clause. So you have to get out of those ops for a minimum of 7 years. Now, I know the CIA is listening to this, and they know I've just did methods and procedures. So come on at me. I'm ready. They might kill me, but they sure as hell can't eat me. If they did eat me, they're going to get damn sick. So,
well, one thing I wanted to ask you about, and we kind of glanced over when we were talking about, boy, you just raised a lot of issues. Folks, you're not going to hear this anywhere else. End's Law, systematics connection with U.S. 1982 End's Law, they signed a $10 million contract with the Justice Department to install their Promise software into the offices of the U.S. attorneys. And as we watched, throughout history, we looked at this, and I was researching this, and of course that brings us into Danny Casolaro, who is investigating links between BCCI, Iran-Contra, and End's Law, and he called the covert operation in which he believed the CIA was involved the Octopus, actually. And we know that Mr. Danny Casolaro, as he continued his investigation, he received death threats, and he said that he told his brother one time that he said if there was an accident and he died, not to believe it. And then August of 1991, well, he was found dead in his bathtub of a hotel, or in the bathtub of a hotel room in Virginia, where he had a meeting with the U.S. Army Special Forces covert intelligence officer. Did you know Danny Casolaro?
No, well, I knew of him, and I knew some of his background, but I didn't have any personal. We were in different levels of that. I think he was a little older than I was at that time, but I'm not sure. Well, I know some other guys.
The reason I brought that up is because we're looking at End's Law, then Webster Hubbell as Attorney General, and then, of course, you had mentioned Deputy White House Counsel Vince Foster, who was linked to both Iran-Contra and End's Law through Arkansas companies Parkometer and Systematics. And Vince Foster was found dead in Fort Marcy Park on July 20th of 1993, and then 3 days later, Attorney Paul Wiltshire, allegedly investigating the Octopus, was found dead. People have a habit of dying around.
Well,
go ahead.
Around that time, now look at this. We talked Colonel Sabot, 1990. We talked about Gary Webb. Time later, we talked about the Vincent Foster around that, and then we just brought up a few more. And there's others out there that we know about, but mainstream, our society today doesn't know about it. So the point being, what you just brought out, you're talking about a systematic MO. Who was that systematic MO? Why are all these people dead? They're all going to commit suicide at once. What are we going to do? Go to a ball stadium and say, okay, give me a gun. Let's do this in front of the people,
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
It's just, why are we feared that these people have so much power? I'm talking about dark power. You know what I'm saying when I say dark power? In other words, this is political. In other words, this is the way to install. In other words, we groom people to become president. You see what I mean? We have these syndicates that groom people to become presidents, and I call them puppets. No different than the third world country. You understand what I'm saying now when I say that? We don't have elected officials that work for the people anymore, in my opinion. And they, not only in my opinion, they have demonstrated their incompetence to the American people more than once, over and over and over, for 3-4 periods, presidencies. How many years is that this country has been under control by special interests and lobbyists and cut-out companies and private airplanes and private people and U.S. military people that give their lives because they expose an operation? Do you know about the Phoenix program in Southeast Asia? I know a guy, very good guy, a little flaky lot, and he knows I'll say that. I ain't going to mention his name. But we know what went on with Shackley, Ted Shackley, J.M. Wave headquarters in Miami, Coral Gables, Miami Station, We know what went on. We know there's been assassin teams out there for years. In fact, there was just a document released just a few weeks ago about assassin teams that have been employed by the political interests to go out. Now, how come special lobbyists and political interests have access to military attack teams? We call them the dogs of war. You know what I mean? You don't want to get the dogs of war on your ass. You don't want to get the Praetorian Guards out there on your ass. Nobody knows what the Praetorian Guards are. Nobody knows what the dogs of war are. But they're there. The deaths that you just reported, and I reported, were done by the dogs of war, the Praetorian Guards. Their only mission is to protect what we're talking about. It doesn't go public. That is starting to fade away nowadays. But there are special attack teams. We got drones out here. It won't be long until we be zeroing in on people like me and accidentally take them out from an object that you can't even see, whether it be by laser beam scope or whether it be by an outright 50 caliber bullet through the head, sniper rifle, fired from a drone. The old story of 1984, Big Brother is watching, is now a reality. So that was a prophecy. But do you know that this nation, this country today, does not even know about that movie? And do you know, I asked a college grad girl that just got her diploma about Ruby Ridge. You know what she told me? Ruby Ridge was a cosmetic manufacturer. Can you believe that?
Wow.
22, 23-year-old girl tells me, oh, I know all about that. In fact, I use Ruby Ridge, and I'm getting a tattoo. Okay, fine, lady. Oh, they didn't do that. I said, they shot a dog. They would not do that. Not our government. No. You're talking about, do you mean the cosmetic manufacturer? Was it killing people?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the education system. Why is it not covered? Why is it not history? Talk about Kent State. Go out there. Ask any young person in their 20s, 18, 15, 16, 25, about People's Park in Kent State. Kind of answers you get. So you don't find that in the textbooks. You don't find professors talking about it. Why is it buried? Because it's a very dark, sinister history of the United States. And our elected officials don't want it pointing back to them because they're the people that launched the situation. In other words, I came up through civil rights. I got put in jail because I sat next to a black person on the street in Dallas, Texas. The street car conductor stopped the car, turned around, told me, he said, boy, you should have your ass whipped for sitting next to, and I won't use the N-word. I was in Dallas, Texas. I stopped down as a rebel and drank out of a black fountain, colored. They call them coloreds in those days. This is a colored fountain. Boy, you don't drink out of that colored fountain. You drink over there in the white fountain. What's wrong with you? Your daddy should kick the shit out of you. So that's the attitude of the American people. I grew up through that. Tell you another real fast story. I used to ride a bike down Stonebridge Hill. There used to be some of my black friends out in the streets out there. And also, they went swimming. That's how I learned how to swim. I used to run down there thinking it was smart, and I'd use the N-word, holler, hey, N-word.
Yeah.
And laugh and just pedal as fast as I could, and they'd run after me. But one day they were waiting for me, and they threw me over the bridge and sit there and watch me struggle until I learned how to swim. And then they laughed, and two of the guys turned out to be my best buddy, and we went into the military together, and we became buddies. Now, that's a true story. That's a young kid growing up in Texas back in the 50s. Anyway, didn't mean to bore you, but just reminiscing, sitting here on the phone, just reminiscing a little bit.
Folks, our very special guest is Robert Tosh Plumley, CIA officer. I just can't. It's so interesting to hear the information that you've got to take. This event, it's fantastic. I can't believe it. A couple of people had asked me if you knew Let me find this email here. This one email. Terry Reed is a pilot, apparently with MENA. Did you know him at all?
Yeah, I knew of Terry. Terry's a good man. A lot of the stuff I can't go 100% on what he said. I mean, I don't recommend books. I don't, what
right.
Another man does is his business. Whether he did or didn't, I don't really comment. But I do know this. I know a little bit about the background. I know a little bit about MENA, and I've seen his book, and I know the references to Ali and all that kind of stuff, But I know that he was part of an operation. The depth of his operation or that he's involved with wasn't quite as deep as some of the guys that I was associated with. But there's different people recruited for different things at different periods of time, and sometimes an operation will run for a few months and then it's put on the shelf for safety reasons, and that's a method of so that it can't be compromised, and that's a form of method and procedures. So a lot of guys that have not come forward like Terry did and write a book are compromised. So Terry was compromised. His operation was compromised. Not his operation, but the operation he was associated with, and also his active in that operation was not quite as deep as some people think. He was a pilot. I was a pilot. I don't know all the answers. I wasn't ever at the planning stages in those years. I went from point A to point B, and I piled it here, and I piled it there, and I piled it wherever you wanted it piled. So, that was sort of the attitude that we had in those days. And so there was a lot of us disjointed pilots out there that, some airline pilots, some of them, they didn't even know me, but we run into each other in strange places. We overhear a phrase at a bar, and we know immediately, hey, you're connected, man. And, well, how do you know that? Well, you just let your mouth slip and overload your butt, boy. You just give a secret airbase, the name of a secret airbase, long before Site 51 was even known about. What are you flying in Site 51? Oh, yeah, UFOs? No, man. We're retrofitting weapons and sending them back out. Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Didn't know that kind of stuff happened. Well, you just let it slip, boy. I know you're connected, but you're not in my operation. Anyway, I hope that explains a little bit about Terry Reed.
Yeah.
I can't go 100% on his book, but I can say that he was part of the operations. So,
well, it does, and I've got a Jeff Cook from Fort Worth, Texas, wanting to know. He writes in saying that you had mentioned in your discussion, if you can answer, and I'm paraphrasing here, you had mentioned the deaths of two boys, Kevin Ives and Don Henry, were Bryant, Arkansas teenage boys whose bodies were found August 1987 lying side by side on railroad tracks near the Mena airport. And he asked if you would repeat that story or what was the real deal with that is what he wants to know.
Well, I can only give secondhand and peripheral information on that, but here's what I know about that. In some ways, that's what brought Mena to the surface. Seal was training some pilots, not at Mena, but north of Mena, another base, not a base, but his place. And he had a fat lady, and that was a C-123, and a couple others, smaller aircraft, and aero commanders and stuff like that. But anyway, he was doing some training there, low-flying aircraft, and also doing some what they call halo drops, high-altitude, low opening. Purpose of that was to get combat troops into Nicaragua by dropping them over in the Costa Rica side at high altitude and let them drift over to low-altitude opening in Nicaragua. And they were advisors. So SEAL was sort of doing some of those kind of things. These boys hanging around there started seeing all these aircraft north of Mena. And then they were, this is a story I heard, and they were walking down the railroad track, and they started talking to their family about what they were seeing. It was going on in Mena and north of Mena with all this activity, military activity. And then they reported that to the local police, which was tied in pretty heavy with the Clintons. And it got back to Clinton, and then one day, what I heard, the boys disappeared. Their bodies were later found on the train tracks, and it was reported they were run over by the trains. Well, those boys had been playing on those tracks for years, and they knew their way around the territory there and so on like that. So that was a very suspicious death. So, but the contention was, and speculation, conspiracy theories began to use that the boys found out about the drug running going into Mina, and they reported it. Well, it wasn't quite like that, but investigation started. They found out about defense contracts going to the Mina, and all the aircraft, military aircraft, and private company aircraft going in for repairs and refueling and things like that. And so it was alleged that drugs were being sent into Mina, Arkansas. I'm not saying there wasn't drugs going into Mina, Arkansas, but I'm saying that as far as I know, I didn't fly any direct into Mina except on 2 trips, and that was supposed to be going to evidence bins like it was in El Toro. So same MO, and didn't think too much of it about that time. But after the kids got killed, and after that was exposed, they sort of shut that down a little bit because it was coming up to Clinton's election times, first election, and they shut it all up so that they could not be used. Basically, that was Clinton's Benghazi. Bill Clinton.
Exactly. And if I can say this, Tosh and ladies and gentlemen, the boys were killed on August 23rd, 1987. They were found lying side by side on railroad tracks. Okay, and here's the deal. Kevin Ives and Don Henry. Ives had a fractured skull, and the bottom parts of both legs were amputated. Both kids, actually. The Arkansas State Medical Examiner, Dr. Malik, now he was appointed by then Governor Bill Clinton, ruled the boys had, and I'm quoting this from a report now, fallen asleep on the railroad tracks where their bodies were found. Their arms were neatly folded by their sides. The medical examiner also stated, and I'm quoting from the report, apparently the boys didn't hear the train coming. They were stoned out of their minds on pot. Now, the second page of notes here I've got, Ives' mother, Linda Ives, won the legal right to have the bodies exhumed and re-autopsied by an independent medical examiner who found their cause of death was murder by beating and stabbing before their bodies were placed on the railroad tracks.
Okay. The boys had penetrated a very secret compound that SEAL was training troops out that was going into Nicaragua. A black crew. We got an open line here, by the way.
I can tell.
The echo.
Oh, I got it.
And those boys were pretty well beaten up. They wasn't going to escape. They didn't try to run, scared to death, and knocked unconscious. And then at that point, their bodies were mutilated. And the reason they were mutilated and then carried to the railroad track so that the mutilation could be covered by a train run over them. A train did run over them, but they were already dead before the train ran over them because there was no blood, not as much blood at the crash site of the train that would indicate that the boys were asleep and alive. They were already dead. So that's what I know about that. And that came from a guy that was talking in a bar that got pretty drunk, and he claimed that he was an assassin for the CIA. And that was in Grant, Colorado, and that was just a few months, actually it was a few years after the house fire in Grant, Colorado. Come to find out, the guy that told that story while he was drinking at the Twin Spruce in Grant, Colorado, and some people out there are listening to this, and they know what I'm talking about, and they remember the day that it happened. He was sitting there, and he was a plant, and he was sent out there to pull me out. And he later told me he couldn't do it because he was not paid enough money. Okay. So, and then he was talking about what I just told you. So
well,
I thanked that man. And he did.
Pull you out. What do you mean? What does that mean, Tosh? Take you out?
I was living, in those years I was living in Grand. I was hiding out. I was trying to write a book called The Black Knights of Cuba. And I'd sent that book to an agent, and that agent was a New York agent. That agent was CIA, and that book went to CIA. And then 2 months later, this guy comes in on a helicopter in Grand, Colorado, comes up there to get a sandwich, order a sandwich from Dennis, and he wants to know where he can find his old helicopter buddy, Tosh Plumley. And so then later, when he got drunk, we all had a lot of fun up there and went out to Bigger Junction to did some dancing, picked up some ladies, and raised a little hell. He really got drunk, and he told me the whole damn story. He said, I'm up here to pull you out. Well, pull you out is a phrase, and we'll take you out of operations.
All right. Wow.
Okay, and then,
my goodness.
Then when Colonel Sabot come in the 90s, this man and Colonel Sabot got killed. Gary Webb gets killed. What's it in? Well, tastes back to the international gunfighting. So, yeah, I got a story. The point is, I can tie it all together in a time frame. If somebody thinks that I could fabricate this thing for 50 years, then I'm one hell of a genius. So, anyway,
I guess. Wow. Well, Tosh, we've managed to almost take 2 hours of your time. One individual wants to know if you could comment on CIA Special Operations. I think that was the Joe. Was that the question there? CIA Special Operations, Special Activities Division. If they were the Praetorian Guard he spoke of.
Well, in my day, they were known as the CAG, Covert Action Groups, similar to the Mossad that were used in Southeast Asia, military assault, assassination teams, whatever you want to call it, SOGs, SOGs. All these acronyms. I mean, there's thousands of them, But when you get into the CIA ops, most of those ops that I was familiar with were ops that were, number one, controlled out of the Pentagon, with CIA logistical support. Sometimes how the chain, in my particular day, which is an early day, earlier than what's going on now, but the chain was that the Pentagon, people inside at the basement, if you want to call it that, would protect an operation that was getting ready to be exposed by getting a CIA logistical team and giving them the dossier, giving them the information to go after a particular enemy, whether it be political or whether it be to protect an operation. So I think that's about all I better say about that at this point, because what happens now today is, you see, this was before the Green Beret. This was before special ops, back in the early days. I'm talking about back in the 50s. Our groups were the forerunners of special ops, covert action groups attached to the CIA, but also attached to the White House as Praetorian Guard type thing, or dogs of war or whatever, to be used for various operations in foreign countries. And then, over the years, the lobbyists and special interests infiltrated these particular groups and started using them for special political ops, assassinations, or whatever, taking out enemies of political parties. So that's sort of the history that we have. There's a lot of, I was going to say there's quite a few people that played those ops that know that. And let me, real fast, in essence of time, let me clarify one thing. I was a CIA covert contract pilot, operative. What that means is that everything I just said there is cut out. I'm a civilian working in military ops under CIA jurisdiction. So I'm a contractor. In other words, I was not employed as a case officer. So there's a big difference there. And the reason that people like me are contract employees is for the sake of plausible deniability. And then we are also assigned to aircraft companies that are front companies for the CIA. Evergreen Helicopters, Mountain States Aviation, Intermountain Aviation, L.B. Smith. I can name a host of them. Regina Airlines, Criddle Airlines, World, a lot of them in Southeast Asia, the old Air America, not the new one, and some of these kind of things. So what you have basically an army that is set up by the White House and the Pentagon with CIA logistical support to go in and do various things. Now, sometimes those various things were very good because they would get information that assassin teams in Angola were getting ready to take out an ambassador, and they would fly in there and you wouldn't even know it, and they'd take them out in a heartbeat. But nowadays, those kind of missions go sour because of political influence. And also the teams that do these missions nowadays, sometimes they get killed on the spot. We had an accident with a C-130 and a helicopter back in long before Desert Storm. I can't remember. It was Libya on our. We also, there's been documents recently released where we were sending missiles, tow missiles, over to Iran. We were sending tow missiles to Iran on C-130s, left and right into the White House operation, and the documents I just posted recently on my Facebook page. Anybody wants to read them can read them. Don't believe me, read the damn documents. A friend of mine found them and sent them to me. He's a researcher. And he said, wow, gosh, this confirms exactly what you've been saying. I said, well, yeah, I told you. I've been saying this for 20 years on that operation. The documents date back to 1986, the same time Vince Foster was killed and all these others, and this Clinton clan was gathering momentum to take a governor and run him for president. So, another puppy president. See what I'm getting at? So this guy had a little fun in the White House. That's more than some of the others have had, but what can I say about that?
Isn't this interesting? Tasha, it's something that the Clinton influence has never left Washington since the 1990s, late 80s, early 1990s.
Doug, there's another world out there that the 8 to 5 have no idea that has existed and still exists today. They cannot. They're incapable of believing what this is doing. Now, let me clarify one thing. I have absolutely nothing against the Clinton clan, or Hillary or Bill or whatever the hell you want to call these people. I know what's going on, and they know I know what's going on. There's a different game that people like me are supposed to play. I'm talking way out of school, and I'm pissing a lot of people off, but I'm telling the truth. And I'm hoping that by me coming out, I'll bring these other pilots and players out, and my other buddy out there who I know, who's now on Facebook, he's doing a damn good job too. He knows who he is. I won't mention his name. I mean, if he wanted me to, I would, but maybe he doesn't. But anyway, some people out there that know the background know who I'm talking about, and we all have similar stories. The MO is the same. Comes out of. Do you know what happened in the basement of the White House? That really ticked Mexico off. The documents that would substantiate the gun running going through Carl Quintero's ranch were destroyed in the basement of the Pentagon. However, just recently, the Mexican government found copies, and they presented them to our State Department. And our State Department had no comment, and the ambassador in Mexico threatened to pull diplomatic relations from the United States. So, back to why isn't Carl Quintero being extradited to the United States for the murder of Kiki Camarena, DEA agent? Why isn't Joaquin Guzman being extradited to the United States via Mexico? We have not, according to Mexico, as of today, we have not made the request. Back a few weeks ago, Carl Quintero, a few months ago, let me correct that, made the statement, they can't do nothing to me. I've got the goods on them. I'll tell them all about the CIA thing. Hector Borellis is a decorated DEA agent, and he was in charge of the Kiki Camarena. And he told me he'd go on your program anytime to talk to you about that. I'll tell you another one. Phil Jordan was a decorated DEA agent in charge of the El Paso intelligence unit and knows all about the over 6,000 murders in Juarez on gun running. I went in and photographed U.S. American-made weapons in a warehouse in Juarez, and Bill Conroy wrote about it, and I was with the task force that was training out the Mexican Morenos out of Mexico City to hunt down the renegades within the ranks of the Mexican army. Now, that's all documented before the fact. The ambassadors down there complain. Also, Salem News copied that, too, Salem-news.com, because I give the story to them and the pictures and the ID numbers of the weapons. And that was before Fast and Furious broke. They used Fast and Furious to cover up that operation. So there's your diversion. The straw people are responsible for the guns getting in, U.S. guns getting into Mexico. But I go back to my earlier statement. How do you get an anti-aircraft weapon to Mexico in the back of a pickup truck that you got from a mom-and-pop gun show? Doesn't work. So American people need to know that. Why doesn't our elected officials investigate that? If they investigated that, it would lead into the campaign contributions, and they can't afford that to happen because they'd all be impeached or put in jail. So we don't have people working. We got good people, like I said, but they can't do their jobs because there's too many gatekeepers, too many lobbyists, too many special interests that have access to the White House. And they implement, and the payoff comes. We put you here, now we expect you to do this. And that goes across Senate, Congress, President. Now, I don't know if I can say it any clearer than that. So I've made some strong allegations here, and I know they're listening. I know what's going on, and I know I'm going to get my ass reamed. So, but I believe within my heart, this is something that the American people need to know. Now, again, don't believe a damn word I say. I've given everybody here through my Facebook page all the links, all the background. All they got to do is take the time, go out, and check it out. And then, in answer to your other question, get another movement, and let's get our country back. Let's throw these people out. Let's give the ones that are in office today that won't change, that want to save the Constitution and the flag, let's give them a chance. But we're going to have to do something to get the corruption and all the bad apples that are spoiling the good apples out of this barrel. If we don't do it fast, then America's slow coup d'etat will continue until we're all convicted as felons and we're all going to jail or be dead. That's my opinion from what I know from 50 years doing black ops. Can I say it any clearer than that, Doug?
No. Tosh, I'll tell you something. What an incredible 2 hours. I've got one last question here. We're up against it, but do you remember 2007? This is February of 2007. There was a huge, and I mean a huge, weapons seizure, military supplies season. I'm not even sure how to pronounce the name. Tamaulipas, Mexico, across from Brownsville, Texas. There was a huge. It was. Do you know anything about that? I mean, you're talking about assault weapons and ammunition seized was sufficient to equip a 3-6-man squad.
There's storage houses all over Texas. One of them I just posted on the documentation was finally released. Very good investigative reporter that is currently working a documentary. I'm not in it. I don't want to be in it. I mean, it's not a question of negative. I don't want to be in it. I just think it's not a good thing. I'm not looking for publicity. I'm just looking for truth. But anyway, he had forwarded me some very extremely sensitive documents about a storage facility in Texas. And also that one and the one you just mentioned, weapons have been coming out of that for a long time. Now, there was a question about what you said, that some Zeta people had came over and robbed that deal. I don't know if that's what you're talking about or not, but that's one of the stories that I heard. I have no documentation to back that up. That's a hearsay deal, but that it was a set-up deal and blamed on the Zeta cartel coming across the border and hitting that deal, when in reality, one of our black op crews that were moving weapons out of there to go to the Middle East.
Okay,
Is that
all right.
with what you've heard?
Yeah, and this involves a SEAL Cardenas Gulian, I believe it is. He was being held at that time on trial in Houston, Texas. The Zetas, that's correct. This involves the Zetas and what have you, but so the United States breaking international law and U.S. law, and oh boy. Well, Tosh, you've got to stay safe, my friend.
There's enough out there. I mean, you just got another one. With another one, back when Peter Bruton was CIA, George Bush, and I don't know what it was. I can't remember the title, but Peter Bruton, look it up, CIA and Bush. He covered a lot of that about Las Vegas, right there in the Big Bend, Iron Mountain, the secret base of banging guns through that area down into Carl Quintero's ranch, and eventually going into the southern front of the Iron Contra. So, it's all documented, but it's so disjointed. And again, that's the reason for the Facebook page, is to pull all this disjointed together and present it to anybody that wants to sit there and look at it. Now, everybody's gonna say, "Oh, you dirty scroundrel, you're a rat. You're trying to undermine the country." No, I'm just trying to tell. Hey, look, I'm just saying what I did. Go back to the I Run Drugs for Uncle Sam. That was done in 1990. And now today it's just coming out public without Tosh Plumlee. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. Tosh, and ladies and gentlemen, Robert Tosh Plumlee of Facebook, please follow him on Facebook. Support Mr. Plumlee in terms of get behind him. Look, we need him around. I don't want to hear about Mr. Plumlee having a heart attack or slipping and falling or anything like that. And I know you're not prone to suicide.
I'm sorry. I just took an FAA physical for my first class to keep my pilot's license. I don't fly now. But anyway, I took a physical. So anyway, just in case I did have a heart attack, anyway, I thought I'd just throw that in for luck.
Well, you said a lot. You said a lot today, Tosh. You're invited back anytime. I mean, people. This is a very historic broadcast, Tosh.
Well, get a ride in. Get a ride in out there, Doug. Get people to ride in. Let's see if we can get a good contingency, a good professional people to not march on Washington, but let's just see if we can get some good, professional, honest, hard-working American citizens that's willing to put their butt on the line and go up there and see if we can get some kind of hearing and present these questions and these other matters to our elected officials if they will receive us. If they don't receive us, then they're not working for the people. Does that make sense?
Amen, brother. It does indeed, my friend. It does. Tosh, until next time, please be safe. God bless you, sir. Thank you for everything you've done and you continue to do. You're in our prayers. You have our support. And thank you for being the whistleblower you are.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for having me on your program.
All right, sir. Folks, that's Robert Tosh Plumlee. Please follow him on Facebook. Keep him in your prayers. Send him a message on Facebook. Tell him that you heard him on our program, or however you do it. I don't answer any private messages on Facebook, so I don't know how to do that. But make a note on his page or whatever it's called, the line of time or something. That thing.
I'll keep pulling it all together.
There you go, buddy. All right, my friend. God bless. Take care. We're up against a break that we're much late for.
We're going to come back with your phone calls at 661-244-98.
I don't want to be overly walking in on these things, but this is some of my turf, and So I do think maybe there's some additional information that would help some of the people trying to understand, this big picture. Because, of course, we were talking about Mexico and South America and Benghazi and the Mideast, and it actually is tied together. And Tosh is talking what he personally knows from the pilots he's talked with, from his contacts, and his own personal observations. And so he's giving a perspective that's important because he is giving detailed information with a type of precision at the uncanny level. And then it's up to us, up to the American public, to then take that piece of the puzzle that he has put on the table, or those pieces, and fit them into the larger picture. And there is this bigger picture that I think here on Hagmann and Hagmann, and maybe a handful of other shows, but really primarily right here on Hagmann and Hagmann, has been begun to get filled in. The puzzle pieces are starting to fall in place. And it's becoming harder and harder, even for those that don't want to believe it or don't want it to be seen, to ignore the facts of what's in front of them. And so just let me come back just for a moment to the boys and railroad track, and then I'll go to the bigger picture. One of the things that was occurring there was that, for example, Barry Seal flying in and out of Mina, there was some modifications being done to aircraft there, and he had cargo doors being put inside of the aircraft that were technically illegal, but he had them done for a very specific reason. And, of course, one thing that you don't realize, because it's Mina, Arkansas, is what's on the just right there at the other end of the airport practically. It's Oklahoma, and what's in Oklahoma? Largest Army base in the country. So when these aircraft are coming and going there, it's not like they're not being watched. And when the aircraft were coming into Mina, part of what was occurring there and why these railroad tracks were so important, that was private forest area, some of that the trains went through, and so you could control access to that area somewhat technically legally, or train troops for work in South America and things like that. And you can look at who those owners of those tracks were. But on train tracks, these train tracks are out in flat country. It's not like out in the West where you got to go around mountains and hills and rivers and streams and everything else. They're pretty long, straight stretches. And so what do you have on along the train tracks? You have lights. And those lights are green for the rails or red for the rails. So if you're carrying drugs and you want to land without any drugs in your aircraft and you line up to come into the runway, but 10, 15, 20 miles out, depending on where your drop site is for that particular day, you can push those bales right outside of the airplane, and where do they go, into the forest? No, right down on the railroad tracks. You land, there's nothing in the plane. The bales don't always stay intact. They usually do, but sometimes they don't. If you're smart and you know what's going on or you've seen something, you might find a bale that didn't get got, or that some of the residue is there on the side of the track. Get a little surprise. And so those kids very possibly were out there because they had heard the stories or knew specifically somehow about that, and they stumbled into people that were picking up this stuff because that's their job. And they couldn't let them go back to town and tell their story, so they had to be dead. Now, that certainly changed things a bit there in that area because the deaths and then the autopsy, things didn't match and things had to be moved to other places. But let's think about Arkansas in a more generic sense. What was going on in Arkansas? And remember, this was happening during Reagan. Let's think about the bigger picture for a second and go back to prior to Reagan. In the 70s, we just shut down Vietnam. the Russians were making inroads into Nicaragua with the work with Noriega, or with what's his name there? I can't think of the president there. And then on the other side of the country and down in the south, China was making inroads down there in Peru with the Shining Path and some of the guerrillas there. And they were Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua. And so we had the Russians and the Chinese trying to get a foothold into South America. And the American public didn't have any desire, no stomach, to get involved in another jungle war, and especially in our own continent. And because we were in that post-Vietnam era. We bugged out of Vietnam in 1972. We stopped supporting the Vietnamese in 1974, things fell, and it was horrible. And but those vets came back disenchanted because we hadn't actually gone to win the war. Even though we did win, we were handcuffed and hamstrung so much that eventually it got turned over to the bad guys anyway. So during the Carter administration, the way that the Carter people went about going after the drug problem in South America was they go take out the top kingpin one way or another, and that was like chopping starfish in half and throwing them back in the ocean. What happens? You don't kill the starfish, you get two starfish. It's just chopping them in half doesn't kill them. And so you'd end up, you'd take out the top guy and you get five more. So what the strategy was, and so when Carter came into office, we really had about 50 guys that were problem children spread out around South America, and none of them were monstrously huge, but they were, big, but they weren't just monstrous. And by the time we were done, we had 500. And those vehicles and boats and aircraft are coming into the country, and there's so many, you didn't have enough personnel to go in and identify every group and infiltrate them and try to plug these holes where these drugs were coming in. And more importantly, if you have the drugs, what do you got also? You got the money. Well, the Russians and the Chinese are using the drug money to fund their insurgency operations, to unseat legitimate governments and get in these communist governments. So the drug money from getting those drugs to the biggest drug markets in the world, Europe and USA, primarily the USA, that drug money from was funding these communist insurgencies. So when Reagan came into office, and it was part of the kitchen cabinet plan with Casey and the others, even before Reagan took office, you'll recall that he had a number of meetings with key people after the election to begin working out the strategies that they were going to apply before Reagan even got to the White House, so they could hit the ground running. And they were pretty intensive. They got going hard at it. And Casey was able to, get to the position of being director of CIA. And the strategy that was determined as going to be the winning strategy was that rather than taking out the top kingpins, there was going to be centralization of the drug trafficking. And so I'm condensing a very complex, involved story down to a very simple narrative, but this is essentially what happened. A couple of the guys were directed to make contact with the biggest of the drug dealers in one specific country, which was Colombia. Now, the guy that actually ended up making the contact was Don Hall down there in Costa Rica. Now, his name has been brought up a couple of times, and Tosh brought him up tonight. Don Hall's the guy that had that runway that the Army Corps of Engineers spent $17 million building on the East Coast in Costa Rica, in between two mountain chains where there's more of the most poisonous snakes on the planet, this game preserve, than just about anywhere else in the world, so that nobody could come in by the jungle and sneak up on them. He had a very protected location. And Don Hall was the guy who was a former OSS from World War II, who was referred to in the Tower Commission report from Iran-Contra as a private party with agency contacts, referring to the CIA, and underworld contacts, referring to the drug dealers in South America, primarily Colombia. And what Don Hall did, the earliest moment in the Reagan administration, was approached 6 of the biggest drug dealers in Colombia. They were brought up to Zurich, and they had a little private meeting, and there we talked about a strategy, and the strategy was we were going to let them have a free path to get drugs here to U.S. soil, but we were going to take half of them. And in exchange, rather than us go fight all the other drug outlets in South America, they were going to get to go quell any drug shipments that were coming direct to the United States. They were going to buy all the paste, all the cocaine paste anybody in South America could make. And they were going to make them an offer they couldn't refuse, which was, you sell us the paste, here's the price we're paying. You can make all the cocaine, coca leaves, grow all the coca you want, and turn it into paste. This is what we're buying. They centralized the drug manufacturing trade in South America. Now, those places that didn't want to comply or didn't want to sell to them, especially out of Bolivia and places like that, we couldn't go there because the American people weren't going to support military action in Central South America, not overt. We had no stomach for it after Vietnam, understandably so. The Colombians would go deal with those problems. We supplied them the arms. We gave them what they needed. They went in and dealt with these other gangs and made them a deal they couldn't refuse, or made them an appointment with the devil, and stopped this drug trade, which did what? It cut off the flow of money to the communist drug dealers being supported by the Chinese and the Russians. Now, in the course of doing this, obviously, what are we doing? We're dealing at arm's length with the bad guys. We created the drug kingpins around which the drug trade in South America revolved. And yes, we knew exactly who was buying the paste, exactly where it was going, because we were centralizing the drug trade during the Reagan administration. Now, who was involved, or who was in charge of the Drug Interdiction Task Force during the Reagan administration? Former director of CIA, George Bush Sr. And what were we doing? That's where Ollie North came in. He was doing important work because we were trying to work out how we were going to cut off this flow of funds going to these communist groups that were subverting these legitimate governments in South America. In the course of doing that, we're involved with some pretty bad guys. And we had some people that were fighting us, including people in the Senate and in the House, who, we had the Boland Amendment, and we couldn't send arms down to Nicaragua, to the Contras to try to come up against the Russians. And we had observers that were down there that were watching what was going on. One of the observers that was pretty famous back during the Clinton administration was Larry Nichols. Larry Nichols was down there and went in through Honduras, and he was a former SEAL. And he went in and observed the arms that we were shipping or had some involvement in going into Nicaragua, and how they were being used, and also observed all the Russian activities there with the Hind D helicopters and the support that Russia was giving to Nicaragua to go after the Contras. In fact, one of the things Larry Nichols did is he filmed the first time anywhere in the world that our intelligence agencies, our defense agencies, had ever observed that a Hind D helicopter could hover or back up. What was critical about it was such a heavy helicopter, it had to have airflow over the rotors and the wings, those little winglets, in order to stay aloft, so it couldn't just hover. But he observed it hover, and that meant it could stop and rake an area with fire or missiles and decimate an area. It changed the equation, what you needed in order to take out a Hind D, because if it could hover, it wouldn't turn its backside to you, and you couldn't put a red eye in it. And so arms were brought in to help with the Contras, including red eyes that were copies. They weren't U.S. red eyes. They were made in China. And, that was all kept in check. But in the course of doing this, what else was going on? And this is another angle that people need to be aware of. This is before people knew that there were such things as nano anything. But we had nano tags, micro tags they were called, but they were really smaller than that. And besides going in and choking down the supply of finished cocaine to just Colombia, because what we did is we would sell chemicals. One of the guys that we dealt with was a guy up in Utah, a Mormon guy, and he had a chemical manufacturing plant, and one of the things the agency needed was a particular set of chemicals, and they wanted to tag that chemical going into South America as covertly as possible, and the owner didn't want that chemical being manufactured because he knew what it was for, and he said he couldn't have anything to do with it. He said that would be wrong. And so they essentially put the guy out of business and took his business from him anyway. And then they put those chemicals in play with these microtags to get them out in there. And what was happening was the chemicals with each supplied to different groups. With these microtags, we could tell exactly who got them and how they got them. We identified the chains of supply. One of the things that happened, by the way, in that same time period, we went down in Brazil. There was one of the largest labs there ever. Had like 180 aircraft, and that was too big for the Colombians to deal with. So we sent in Army Rangers and a support group who went in and took that whole thing out there in the jungle there in Brazil and shut it down. Had huge, huge labs. So that, again, we choked down the supply only of cane from Colombia. Then, here on the state side and in Europe and up in Canada, we'd look at the drugs. We had guys go out in the black suits. They'd take tests, samples of drugs all over the country. And after they took the samples, these police departments would be asked to focus on certain groups and not focus on other groups as they're looking at the drugs. What was the reason for that? Well, the reason was because the drugs that were coming out of Colombia, we knew exactly where they were coming from. They were tagged a certain way. We didn't want to follow those groups because we already knew where they were coming from. But if we found drugs that were coming from a place that either didn't have micro tags or was a tag that we were interested in because it was another group, then we'd have them go after that group, go up through the chain and identify all the players. And then who would we send after them? The Colombians. That's why they had this reputation for being ruthless, because they were working as our mercenary army to help keep this stuff in check, and they were making a lot of money. Billions and billions and billions. Why? Because we centralized the drug trade. We had one of them that got out of line, thought he could do a little side stuff, and we sent a missile in his back door. Shut him down. Let him know that that's not going to happen. The other guys got an understanding and stopped. So kind of the way it was played. It was done, it's not pretty. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to know about it. What was the other thing that was going on here? And this is where we get back to the other side of the Arkansas equation. You got drugs, you got money. You had the attempt to subvert governments, but where's the money going? And if we're involved in it, how are we controlling or working with or directing that money flow? Well, we take out a lot of the banking entities that they were using, and we had a plan, and we started sifting in covert operatives who, on the face of it, were providing banking services for a fee to legitimize their money, launder their money. What we're monitoring where the money's going. We're trying to make sure it's not going to help these communist movements that are subverting the governments. And you have to think of all of this in the context of like a police pawn shop operation. So the police go in and they set up a fake pawn shop. And the officers look like bad guys, gruffy, and they look the other way, and the guy comes in with a VCR. And they don't ask a lot of questions. They don't look for ID. You know, they act like they're gonna, and then when the guy starts to hedge, okay, yeah, look, okay, whatever, just, yeah, here's what I'll pay you for it. And they don't give him as much because he doesn't have the ID, but then he knows he can put it there. Well, what's he do? He goes and tells 10 of his buddies, hey, these guys don't really look that close on the ID, so take it there. And so all the other criminals start bringing their stolen goods there. And the police take it all in. It's all videotaped, but they look like, for real, honest-to-goodness, total bad guys. Now, after a period of time, there comes a moment when you got to decide when to stop the pawn shop operations, have a party, and arrest everybody. And the problem is, if you wait too long, the guy that brought in the VCR one day, what if he goes out and decides he's got to have money and he knows where he can sell something if he gets it, and so he breaks in the house to get the TV, and oh darn, the homeowner's there, and bang, somebody gets shot dead. And now the police are stuck here. They knew the guy was freaking selling stolen stuff, and they didn't arrest him immediately, and somebody got dead. And it's their fault for not arresting him right as soon as they knew that he had stolen stuff. Well, sometimes in the course of a pawn shop operation, what you'll do is if you got a for real bad guy that you suddenly figure out who he is, you'll surreptitiously, for some totally different reason, he's walking down the street and threw up a gum wrapper on the street, and the police arrest him. Doesn't know that they've had him figured out at the pawn shop. They don't tie the two together. And you might take guys out periodically and keep the pawn shop going for a little bit longer because you're trying to fill out your case, you're trying to get a little extra detail, and you're trying to get as many people in it as possible before you blow the whole thing wide open.
Okay, hold on a second. But you're making this sound like an altruistic, the gun running and the drug running. It's almost.
Well, give me a second. I'm almost done. Let me pull this together. I'm trying here. So now we come back to, okay, so we got the money. And we're providing money laundering services. So what was the big money laundering thing that came to the light back in the 80s and up into the 90s? BCCI, Bank of Crooks and Criminals International. And you got Clifford Clark in there, and you got all these other folks in there getting past the regulators and getting charters here in the U.S. and other places. And what was BCCI doing? It was laundering drug money. It was laundering money from guerrilla operations and all sorts of covert stuff. What was really happening? We were getting the back door on all the various players. If you capped them off right the second they came in the door, you'd never get the next one. You're monitoring the flow of these resources. And now you come up to Arkansas. And what was going on in Arkansas? And what's the connection to Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton? You're in the Reagan administration era. And there's a company, it's a pseudo-public-private company called ADFA, Arkansas Development Finance Authority. And ADFA would issue a state bond for developing businesses in the state of Arkansas. And the idea was, Arkansas was the 49th, and some people would argue the 50th state in the country economically. Mississippi and Arkansas fighting for last place. And so you're trying to bring business, attract business to Arkansas to get jobs for Arkansas residents. And so Arkansas Development Finance Authority would issue a bond that was guaranteed by the state of Arkansas, and that bond would, say, be for $400 million. And so somebody that wanted to help out their state or wanted to make a buck, they'd buy that bond, and it has a rating, and then they would get paid back on that investment in the bond over time. At the time, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11% interest. Well, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority bonds were actually below market. If a New York bond was paying 8%, or if a California bond was paying 8 or 9%, the Arkansas bond would be paying 6%. And the California New York one would be a AAA bond, and the one out of Arkansas would be a B-. Well, if you're an investment advisor, you wouldn't advise to buy the Arkansas bond. Well, who's buying these bonds? People out of the Caymans, people out of South America. They'd issue the bond, and then this money would come out of South America, buy the bonds through legitimate companies in the Bahamas, in the Caribbean, and it would get into the coffers at Arkansas Development Finance Authority. Then what would happen? Arkansas Development Finance Authority, after this bond was issued and it was fully funded, and there's $400 million there, they'd go out and loan it to Arkansas businesses, like chicken companies, like parking meter companies, all sorts of companies. And then they would try to develop business and make jobs for Arkansas residents. So Larry Nichols, after he can't be in Nicaragua anymore, in Honduras, because for personal reasons, and he comes back to Arkansas, and he asked Bill Clinton, who's they're pretty good acquaintances, hey, I need a job. And he says, well, let me see what I can work out for you. And he sends him over to ADFA. They give him a job. He gets in there, and he's trying to figure out what he's supposed to do. They just gave him a Lincoln and, golf clubs and said, yeah, that's your office over there. Didn't tell him to do anything. So he's trying to keep his job. Nobody's clued him in what he's supposed to be doing. He's not supposed to be doing anything except golfing and being a good old boy. He starts going through the file cabinets, figuring he better find out what's going on and do his job and make sure people are paying on time on their stuff and else. He goes through and does his investigation to find out who's late and hasn't been paying and isn't servicing the bonds. Nobody's paying. They're loaning out billions and billions of dollars, and nobody's paying on these loans. So if you're a big box store company and you can get billions of dollars in loans and you never have to pay them back, how easy is it to be successful? You get billion-dollar loans, $100 million at a time, $50 million at a time, but you never make a single interest payment, let alone the principal? How's that a fair playing field for all the other chicken farmers across the country, for all the other box stores around the country? Going to put every mom and pop out of business if somebody can operate their store on loans they never have to pay back. It's a tilted playing field. Who has the sole signing authority for the checks on the payout when ADFA would make a loan to a worthy business or business owner or businessman? Only the governor. The governor alone can sign the check to go to the company. Well, excuse me, it's laundered drug money, black operations money. It's not even drug money for the drug dealers. It's CIA black operations money. And they're loaning it out to the businesses because the businesses are doing their dirty work for them. They're part of the op. And the governor is the key guy because the way the state law is written, he's the guy that signs checks. You don't have to have everybody in a loop. You just got to have one guy in the loop. That's it. And even he doesn't have to know that much. He just has to know, sign this check. It's going to these guys. Okay. And by the way, who writes up those bond issues? Well, law firms do. They write it up all neat and proper. It meets all the proper SEC requirements, and it meets all of the trading requirements in New York and blah, blah, blah. So who is the biggest bond writing law firm in Arkansas?
That wouldn't be Rose Law Firm, would it?
Rose Law Firm. And so who worked at Rose? Hillary. Who else worked at Rose?
Vince
Foster. Now, you had a lot of other people. Who else worked at Rose? Janet Reno was the head of the Justice Department, but who was number 2? Webb Hubbell. He was Rose Law Firm too. And by the way, just for any of your researchers out there that want to, go and question some of this and how it can't be that much money, it's a little bit. On planet Earth, in the early 90s, where was the largest, off of Wall Street, outside of New York, where was the largest brokerage firm on planet Earth?
Oh,
somewhere
I know
in California, somewhere in Germany, somewhere in Singapore, Tokyo. No.
Hold on.
Arkansas.
Oh shoot! I was gonna offer a prize. Okay, I was gonna offer a prize for the answer.
So here's my point. Let's start to pull this together. We don't have all night here.
All right.
So now we have these operations, which are, we're trying to save, the country. We're trying to save the planet. These threats against us from Russia and China weren't nothing. They were serious threats. You had aircraft coming in, breaching our southern borders in our air net. You don't know if that's a backfire bomber or if that's a drug running plane. We need to plug those holes. Reagan was right to do it. And it's dirty business. Okay? You want to throw stones at North and everybody else? It was dirty business. And some of the people, even in our own government, weren't helping us to fight the real monster, straight arrow. But the other side of the coin is, in the course of doing this, things can go awry, and there's a lot of money involved. A lot. Unbelievable amounts. And it wasn't being, as Tosh pointed out, it wasn't being monitored and controlled in every area as well as it needs to be. And next thing you know, an example with Noriega. What did Noriega want? He wanted to have a drug lab in Panama and make the big bucks like the Colombians did next door, but he didn't understand. Those guys were on a leash. We were doing it to centralize the drug trade. Why? Because what happened under the Bush administration? We went down and made all these same drug guys an offer. We had centralized it down so efficiently, so effectively, just to 5 guys, that now we told them, okay, you can have your money, but you got to stop dealing. Well, they couldn't do it. They didn't want to stop. They didn't, they wouldn't play the game. So they had to, arrest them, put them in prison, and we stopped them. But the war was on, but it was centralized. It was in one place. It made it a lot easier to deal with it. And that was the objective of Bush 1, was starting to shut down those operations that we had centralized under Reagan, appropriately so, and shutting down some of the banking stuff. But moving forward up to now, some of these players have reinvented themselves, and what do we got? We got people in government who got there under nefarious means and who got there with drug money. We think about the Chinese money getting Bill Clinton elected with all of the loans to the campaign and all of the donations from the Chinese restaurant there in Little Rock. But that was only half of it. Just as big, equally as big as the stuff that was coming in from Indonesia was the stuff coming from all the drug stuff in Central and South America. Well, then you have to ask a question. Who was the money coming from in Central and South America? Was it actually coming from the drug dealers, or was it coming from people who had CIA associations and wanted to keep the money flowing and their connection to it? Because it was a business for them. And then remember this. When you get to Africa, what's going on right now between Africa and South America? Gun running and drug running. When that Saudi was being targeted to be killed a couple years back by the Mexican gang, What was the real connection? It was a South American, West Africa connection because they're running drugs to West Africa and up into Europe, and they're running guns and munitions from West and North Africa, a la Libya and other places, into Central and South America and up through Mexico and to Mexico. And where are you going to see them? Downtown Wichita? Downtown LA? Downtown Pittsburgh? This is dirty business. This is for all the marbles. And the problem is that some of these activities done for all the right reasons aren't being supervised properly, and the next thing you know, we got a real monster on our hands. And that's exactly what's happening now. Who's running this joint? Did somebody get put in office by people behind the scenes who want to keep the game going because they're making big money and everything is just a front now for their money laundering operation, their gun running operation on an international scale? And by the way, it's not just about the guns and money on an international scale. What's the rest of the story? Because they're getting ready before we get to them to change up the game and throw a curveball and defund, shut down, nullify all of those countries and governments and banking operations, etc., where we might get them in our courts and keep us preoccupied so they can start a new financial order, a new government order before we can get to them. The race is on. The question is, will your audience and the other audiences figure out the game that's afoot in time, understand the seriousness of it, and get ahead of this? And even here, we have one more piece of this. What about all these banks? Don't you remember that Greg talked about the fact that all these big, monstrous banks were paying monstrous fines, billions of dollars in fines? And what was the deal with these fines? Those fines were for money laundering operations. They were paying fines because they were laundering money. What's going on right now? You're watching these same players making a buck with their money laundering, gun running operations. And they don't want to stop making it. They don't want to lose it. They want to keep the game going. And they have all the money in the world. And they want to keep it. And they have all the power. And they want to keep it. And the question is, can we shut down this Frankenstein monster in time? You know, if you go back to the turn of the century, it's common knowledge now. You can Google it and find out I'm right. Roosevelt family involved in the heroin trade. That was what a lot of the stuff going on prior to World War I was all about over there in China, with the heroin being shipped into the U.S. and into Europe. And they were making big fat money. That's why they had to get their guy in office.
Yep.
You've seen this over and over again. All of the allegations in Southeast Asia prior to Vietnam getting going full speed. The drug running. The drug running out of Afghanistan. You have got to get Sabo's brother on the air and interview him and let him tell you the story about his brother and his alleged bullshit suicide. He was on the trail and understood the problem. It was not just about getting the Taliban in Afghanistan. You got the drug trade is stronger than ever there right now, and where are we at? You got the stuff in South America. You may have gotten a president twice, maybe even a third, because of drug money from South America that wanted to get a guy in office and keep him there, because just like when you're the governor and you can sign the check and you're the only guy with legal authority to sign the check, if you're president, you can make sure the checks keep coming on an even bigger scale. And oh, by the way, if you thought it was just Arkansas, 10 development finance authorities. Illinois, Nebraska, I believe there was Kansas, Kentucky, a whole bunch of them.
10.
Your listeners can do it, 10. And all of those were what? That's where the drugs came into. The drugs were allowed to get free and clear. What did Tosh tell you? 40 tons. He just one pilot. They were flying it in so we could identify the stuff that we were allowing to hit the streets and the money that we were allowing to be made. And allegedly, we were destroying the stuff, which we were at first, and we had some issues, and we ended up flying stuff up here. It's a long story. So at the end of the day, the money laundering operations and the banksters, that's what Greg's telling you about. All these banks we're dealing with, and they're going to shut everything down with the mortgage thing. Why are they doing that? Because they got to close the door on our ability to see how they're really making their money, so they can get in power and hold the whole world. Where are they getting all this money? How are they doing it? And the guns and everything else. Why? Because ultimately, what were we worried about in South America in the first place with the Chinese and the Russians? That they'd use that drug money to subvert legitimate governments and put in their own puppets. What happened to us? Hello? What got Clinton in office? What do you think got this guy in office? What do you think is going to get the New World Order in office over the whole world? Laundered black ops money. Hello? And they're going to close the game down, allegedly because they caught all the criminals and because the mortgage thing went to... This mortgage thing is intentional. It's a time bomb. It's an EMP. They intend, like an EMP strike, to shut it all down, baby. And when it's all shut down, give a new government to fix the problem because it's all broken, but we're here to fix it. It's new and improved, 99 and 44 100% pure bullshit. Wake up! Thanks, Doug.